Is it? Alright, well, I just started, streaming with the intro. Hopefully it'll stay out. Like,
Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Erica from The Harsh Reality. We are very, very excited to announce tonight that we have a great guest. His name is Mike Goodrich, the author of Hellstorm. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me.
Do we have, how is the sound? Before we go any further, let's do sound check.
Good here.
Can you guys hear us in the audience? All right, awesome. We are also joined tonight by a good friend of Mike. His name is Trav. Trav, welcome to the show.
Thanks, good to be here.
All right. So this is an amazing story that you put together, Mike. I really am at a loss for words or an ability to articulate what you've managed to do so well in this book. But before we get into that, I want to do a little bit of intro as to what your background, you know, where you came from and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm a product of the American Midwest. I was born and raised there. And I went to school there. Just virtually everything there. And I also graduated from college there. And that's probably where this really did begin, because once I'm one of those people like the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz. I actually needed a piece of paper. I didn't think I was smart enough to do it on my own, so I had to go get that parchment, that piece of paper, that diploma from the university. And after that, yeah, I had all the confidence in the world, you might say. I read a lot of books, rubbed shoulders, so to speak, with a lot of great people who wrote the books. And even though I'd majored in psychology for most of my college days, I actually ended up with more hours in history. And of course, at the time, everybody was asking me, are you going to go teach? And I never had that. That was never an idea. I never wanted to go teach because, quite honestly, I was bored to death mostly by high school and somewhat in college.
Right. Especially if you had a horrible history teacher.
Yeah, that doesn't help either. But I thought I want to write history.
Right.
And so, as it turned out, I ended up living in New England painting watercolors for a very modest living. But one night in Boston, I actually decided to go to work on a history book. I had already done some research before I had left Kansas. So I went to work on the outline and finished that the next morning. And 8 years later, I found myself the author of a published book on the American Civil War, my first love back then. But that's basically where the writing thing started. And of course, that book even then was a bit controversial, and I think I've written controversy every step of the way since then, because quite honestly, there's so much out there that needs to be covered that isn't being covered. That's it could be buried under mountains of lies and propaganda, like the American Indian Wars. I wrote a book that's still pretty successful called Scalp Dance, on what it was really like out there, fighting the Indians on the frontier and on the American Midwest and High Plains. And it was not Dances with Wolves, and it wasn't Little Big Men. This was the way it really played out. You know, the rape, the torture, the mutilations, things like that. But no, ultimately, I had known something about World War II. I was interested in it. I'd read a lot of books on it. And I got to a point in my life in the mid-1990s that I decided, what the hell, let's give this a look. Let's go do some research, see what we got, and see if the good war really was the good war.
And you had already had a good sense that history isn't what we're told.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. I was born with that skeptical gene. And so, and then I went to work and found out that not only have we not been told the truth about World War II, the so-called good war, but we've been lied every step of the way about
Yeah.
the war.
Yeah.
And that's where that book began. And that's, quite honestly, prior to that book, Hellstorm, I had been writing about the Civil War, the Indian Wars, Abraham Lincoln, the assassination, the occupation of the South, books like that.
Right.
That were controversial in their own right.
Right.
But they weren't so controversial that they kept me off the mainstream media.
Okay.
I had lots of gigs doing major radio interviews with really big time. I mean, I'm talking millions of people listening. TV, C-SPAN, book TV, things like that, book notes. But there was none of that, of course, when Hellstorm came out. That was the end of that.
Right.
And I knew it would. I knew it would be. I mean, I know who's controlling what in this country, and so it was an easy step then from writing and being on the mainstream media to writing a book like Hellstorm and just stepping over with ease to the white nationalist movement, to the truth movement, to the right movement, by the way, the good movement.
Right.
Despite the loss of money,
Right.
despite the loss of prestige, whatever, I'd never go back. I would do this again.
And I have to give you all the kudos in the world because you chose truth over the money and the status. The things that so many people out there choose, and they give up, the truth, and they participate in this grand scheme of lies, and we all of us citizens end up with the hurt. So I really want to commend you on your bravery and willingness to stand up for the truth.
Oh, thank you so much. Of course, it does have its consequences.
Right.
I've been scrambling, quite honestly, financially ever since then. But like I said, I wouldn't go back, not a bit. To me, I cannot think of one thing in life more important than the truth.
Right.
Without the truth, what are we? We're no
Right.
better than... Well, but that said, I've got to say that so desperate are people for the truth that books like Hellstorm, it'll be kicking long after I'm dead. Unless it's replaced by, let's say, 1, 2, 20, 200 books similar in nature. And hope to God there are those books out there.
Yeah.
You cannot say what I say in Hellstorm too many times.
Right.
If you say it 3,000 times, it's still not enough until people actually understand what happened. And not just understand, but do something about it the next time so that it never happens again to anybody.
That's right.
So yes, truth is, I'd like to go way out on a limb and say truth is the most important thing in life to me. I'm willing to die for the truth. I don't want to die. I don't want to be tortured for the truth, but so be it. If that's the way it is, then I still stick with the truth.
That's right. Amen, brother.
Yep, it's something you can take to that last rest of yours, if you know what I'm saying. I've always had this great fear, Erica, that when my time comes, and if I happen to be in the operating room looking up at the white lights staring down at me, and I'm pretty close to going, and I know it, and the doctors know it, I want to be able to ask myself, did I do everything I could? Did I do everything possible? And I don't want that answer to be no.
Right. No regrets.
Yes. I want it to be a yes. I can't say yes now, so I've got to stay alive a while longer.
Right.
There are still things I need to do, but I'm doing the best I can at this point, and I think it's working. I think it's resonating. I think despite being poverty-stricken from writing this type of history, the truthful history, I sense, I feel, and I've actually seen results of, let's say, Hellstorm. It's translated into German now. A lot of people in Germany get to read this book, get to see what really happened, get to see that Grandpa and Dad were telling the true stories when they talked about the atrocities being committed against not only the armed forces of Germany, the Wehrmacht and the Navy, but against the civilians, the men, the women, the children, the old people, the pets, seeing the towns destroyed for no reason at all in firebombing raids.
Right.
And so now, fully 70 years after the event, people are finally realizing this was not a good war. It was the worst war. It was an evil war. It was an abomination on the earth. And now people are seeing it. Some people criticize the book. They say, I'm not a historian. I'm not a doctor. Certainly I'm not a PhD. But I am a historian. I'll stake my life on that. I am a historian. I love it that much.
Right.
And when I write these books, I like to think that, well, I have my bias, I have my prejudice. I do believe in certain things, some people don't. But I don't think a history book is any place for me to parade my bias or prejudice. And I strictly adhere to that all the way through. I set the table as best I can with everything I know, with all my research. I try to include both sides in anything I'm talking about.
Right.
I like to set the table and then let the reader come like they're at a banquet and take what they want from the table.
Right.
And then let them decide. And I think that resonates well with our people, as a rule, especially our people. They know history when they're reading it, honest history.
Right. Right.
And,
that's true. Yep.
But it's I did have a follow-up book to Hellstorm, by the way. There was lots of stuff I couldn't get in Hellstorm the first go-around. Hellstorm was... I wrote the book in the late 90s. Couldn't find a publisher because of obvious reasons. The only publisher I did find was with the University Press. And bless the heart of that guy, the editor, he lost his job in 1 month. I'm assuming...
What, from your book?
I'm assuming. Because within 1 month, and he had that job for quite a while, but within 1 month. So the book set up on a shelf for roughly 10 years before it was finally published by a small press in Colorado, who did an excellent job on the hardback. And then in 2012, it was in the paperback and ebook, and now it's in. It's very close to becoming a narrated ebook. Audiobook.
And which book is this?
This is both the English and German translation of Hellstorm.
Okay.
They're both within the next several months will become audiobooks.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great news.
Yeah, a lot of people just don't have the time to read visually. They can listen to the book on the way to work, whatever. Right. So, yeah, things are happening with that. Plus, there are more translations in progress now for the book. Hellstorm, that is. Italian, Croatian, Lithuanian, Danish, Dutch, and so on.
That's amazing.
And Swedish, hopefully. I'm in a legal situation right now with a lady. That's in quotes, the term lady, who actually translated the book, and we had an agreement, just like I do with everybody else who translates the book. But up and behold, she not only translated it, but she published it and is selling it for her own book now. And so, yeah, that's patent copyright violation anywhere, and we're in court right now, and I think the decision's pretty quick and pretty certain.
Good.
I think what's going to,
Good. I have here a basic bio I'd like to read out, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
As long as it's all good.
Of course. Oh, wait. You know what?
Yeah.
I have a call coming in, and that might be someone. Hold on 1 second. Hello? Hey, it's Erica. You want to join in? All right, give me a couple minutes, okay? Yep. I think I sent you the link. Hey, hang on 1 second. It's sorry guys, it's a surprise guest. Hello? Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. No. No. Well, hang on 1 second. I'm going to put you on speaker. I'll let you know when you're on the mic and live, okay? All right, hang on 1 minute. Alrighty. Hang on, let me put this on, and I'm going to do this. See, if I had a staff full of assistants and all that, they could have handled this phone call and we could have continued talking, but I don't. I'm poor.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm just a woman who loves my country and my Constitution, and I'm tired of seeing it shit on. Okay? So that's why I do what I do.
And sometimes it doesn't work if you have a great engineer. Sometimes they flop too.
Right, exactly. Is this connected? Yes, it is. Okay. We'll go here. Where's my speaker? Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Alright, I gotta turn you up a little bit more. We have an admirer of yours, Mike, here on the line, and I'm just gonna go ahead and let him say hello to you. Okay, go ahead,
hello.
Pat.
Hi, good evening. This is Pat Little.
Can you hear him?
Oh my God, my hero.
He says
No.
you're 0. Did you hear that?
I heard clicking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Mike, you want to go ahead and say that again?
No, Patrick, so wonderful to hear
I'm
your
not doing
voice.
anything.
Okay, he says it's wonderful to hear your voice. Are you tuned into the show yet, Patrick?
I thought it was at Pacific time. That's my bad.
All right, I'm going to send you a quick link to the show.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to check the DMs here. Yeah, I was looking into Matt Hale's case, so I haven't been...
Uh-huh. All right, and click share. I'm going to send it to your Twitter, okay?
Sure. I found it on Restream, actually.
Your what?
I found it on Restream.
Oh, okay. Well, here, well, I'm already there, so I'm going to send it to you just in case. All right. When you're all clocked in and stuff, after I'm going to read Mike's bio real quick, and then you could jump on in, okay?
Sure.
All right. So Mike has 2 other books out. I think are these related to kind of the Hellstorm, the summer 1945, Germany, Japan, and the Harvest of Hate in 2018? Mike, is that?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a follow-up book.
Okay, and then the other one is the Rape, Hate, Sex and Violence in War and Peace in 2015.
Yeah, it has.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, and then Mike also has a work in progress called Israel's Assassin, America and the Middle East Massacre, 2001 to 2020. Exposes the subservient nature of the U.S. government to the state of Israel and its devastating consequences for the world. Expected to be released sometime by the end of the year, and I can't wait till that comes out. I want my hands on that one for sure. Mike Goodrich was born and raised in Kansas. He served during the Vietnam War. He is a graduate of Washburn University, where he majored in history, and you also have a psychology degree, don't you, Mike?
No, didn't quite get that.
Oh, okay. But, hey, you have some classes, right?
Yeah.
He is married and lives on the Gulf Coast of Florida. He has written over a dozen books and hundreds of articles. Mike continues on to say, before I wrote Hellstorm and joined the White National Movement, I was a guest on scores of radio talk shows promoting my earlier books. Many of those programs served some of the greatest markets in the U.S., including WBAL, the Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and KSFO in San Francisco, including, additionally, I appeared as a guest in many documentary films that aired on PBS, as well as the Discovery Channel, History, and National Geographic channels. It's very impressive, I gotta say. He was also a featured speaker on C-SPAN several times and addressed numerous historical groups, service clubs, and symposiums from coast to coast. Michael has a website. I posted it in the description part of this video. Please bookmark it, have a visit, bookmark it. I checked it out last night. It's a great website. So, Patrick, are you still there?
Yes, I'm just taking notes on some of these books I have to read. I've only read Hellstorm.
you got some catching up to do.
No, I certainly do. Ryan Dawson has filled me on some of the atrocities that happened around Japan and stuff. But yeah, I'm always interested to learn more. The Zionist banker-controlled Allied countries certainly did plenty of bad things, and that includes, of course, the Soviet Union, which was bankrolled, and the trade routes were kept open by the Zionist bankers for them as they committed their atrocities.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you at the YouTube channel, and can you hear? Because Mike wants to say something to you.
No, I just
I
wanted,
am having trouble getting to it right now on my primary device, so I'm going to plug in a backup phone and tune in now. Let's see.
it was just nothing
And
but
it's harsh reality. I'll
vibration.
find it via Twitter and then tune in from that on my smartphone. And I'll have that in my other ear. I've got 3 different devices with audio feeding to my head right now.
All right, just let me know when you're all set up there. I wanted to ask some other questions of you, Mike, real quick. When you're in Vietnam, what position did you serve, and what armed service did you join?
I was in the Air Force. I never went to Vietnam. I was in the Vietnam War period, though.
Okay.
So I never went over there, risked my skin for that. I had orders to go just before I got out.
Okay.
But no, I think anybody who was in at the time came away with something from that war, and
Right.
it wasn't good, generally. But no, I had a lot of friends go over there. I had a few die. Yeah, it's probably one of America's crummiest wars that we've
Right.
ever had, which is saying a lot. We've got a lot of crummy wars right now,
Right.
too, though. And no, I would strongly urge anybody listening right now who was thinking about it to not go into any military, not go into the U.S. military, period. You're just fighting for another nation at this point, and that's
Right.
Israel. You're not fighting for the United States. It's not fighting for freedom. It's not doing anything good at all for this country, in fact.
Right.
I'd much rather have them here at home guarding that open border that we've got right now in the south,
Right.
instead of killing some people that never harmed a hair on my head and doing it all for the state of Israel.
Right. Okay, can you hear Pat? Can you hear Mike?
Yeah, I just heard he had a few die.
Okay, all right. So kind of let's rewind a little bit so that you guys can talk briefly.
Oh, Patrick, can you hear me okay? No, that would be a no, isn't it?
There might be a delay. Hello, are you still there?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I listened to what he had to say, and I think that it's important to have people that know about the Zionist occupation of most of our seats in our federal government by proxy of Shabbos Goyim. I think that, they can't give unconstitutional orders, and if they say obey the will of Israel, that's not something that someone's obligated to do. And ultimately, I think we're going to come to the point where Israel's lobby pushes so hard that the American people just say, this is insane. And if all the people who are woke to the foreign loyalties... Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, there's a delay. There's a little bit of a delay. So Mike wanted to share some words with you as far as his perception of you.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I just finally have the opportunity to tell and say to you, thank you.
I'm not hearing myself on the stream, by the way.
You should. There's a Patrick. There's a delay. So what you're going to hear through YouTube. Okay.
When Patrick came on the scene, roughly, I think 18 months ago, it was so shocking, so startling, and yet so supremely satisfying to hear someone speak straight as an arrow being shot. And I think anyone who was there then understands exactly what I'm saying. He did something to anyone who heard him, anyone who watched him. He did something incredible.
And I am trying to tune in. YouTube isn't loading for me.
But just keep going, Mike, and then he can catch up and hear it later.
Okay. I think Patrick did something that's that you really can't put your finger on. You know what happened, and
Right.
you can feel it. You can
You think
sense
maybe I
it.
could call into Hangouts or something to get around this?
Right.
Or?
Well, right. I need your email, so if you want to put it into Twitter, I'll hook you up.
Yeah, this would, because this is happening in
Right.
Hangouts, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Let's see.
Okay, I'm going to save what I had to say to
yeah,
Patrick.
it's-
It is lit rest.
Wait. You're live. I don't know if we want people to hear. Hang on a minute. I'm gonna mute. Hold on. Hang on.
Moment, yeah. U.S.
Sorry about that, guys. Technology, it's supposed to be easier, right?
I wouldn't have your
Can't
job,
join
Eric.
while in a phone call, so I'm going to have to hang up the phone, okay?
Yep.
All right, bye.
Bye. I think Patrick is a little boomer tech, huh?
I think I know I am, as a matter of fact. I wouldn't even classify it as tech with me. It's just ineptitude with me. But no, it's such a pleasure to hear his voice.
Yeah.
And knowing he's somewhere connected to us. But
Okay, you should be able to hear me now.
We can hear you. Hallelujah.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry I was out in a hailstorm and I finished a lot of stuff out in Oakland today, so I'm very sorry that I'm not going to use video tonight. I actually still need to shave. And my hair is a mess from the rain.
that's an active man.
Oh, well, I'm just being honest. I wouldn't look good on camera right now.
Hey, brother, though I've got it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fantastic, loud and clear.
I want to tell you what a shocking, startling sensation it was to see you roughly 18 months ago when you came out running for U.S. Senate seat in California. It was just a jolt, a bolt from the blue. I mean, I wasn't expecting you. You came along and you more or less changed everything, changed the dynamics of everything. You were saying things that I had never heard people say before. Thought, maybe, perhaps, but not saying it. And you were saying it as straight as an arrow is being shot. I mean, you're not holding anything back. You're talking, you're speaking straight, you're using freedom of speech to the max. And it just absolutely energized me. It absolutely, well, I couldn't get enough. I kept trying to find you over and over. I'd watched twice some of the things you were doing. And I've got to say, Patrick, well, we both know that election was stolen from you. There is no way in hell that you came in at that position, that final position. You got number 2 at least. And I think you would have won the whole shooting match had you just simply got in. But here's a classic case in a third world nation, which is California, where votes were stolen, where they were actually probably just burned, quite honestly.
I think it's important to notice, though, that a lot of people are aware of this, and the Armenian community, I met with some of their leaders, and they were voting for me because they know who was behind the Armenian genocide. Of course, the Jews from the Masonic Temple over in Toronto. I can't say the name right now. The Greek island. What's it called? The one Sarkozy's family is from. Nicholas Sarkozy. Or something like that. And, you know, they were aware of who was behind the Armenian genocide. I was giving them a voice, and they'd never seen that in American politics. Well, they arrived after Rocco was killed, of course. And they know the votes were stolen. They called me up. They sent me messages. They said, Pat, pretty much every Armenian in the Glendale area, Little Armenia, we weren't on the voter rolls, and we had to do provisional ballots with our names having to go on the ballot for it to count because they were provisional. And I said, well, I did not expect this to be a fair election, given the amount of chop job they did of me in the media when I was just being straight as an arrow, telling the truth, saying things exactly as they are. And I wasn't even really stating opinions.
Patrick, can you speak a little bit more into, because we can hear you, but you're kind of muffled. Can you speak more into?
How about now?
Oh, perfect. Much better. Yes. Thank you so much.
I took the face off the phone. So did you guys catch what I was saying before that was just too quiet?
It was, Yeah. Well, let's just go ahead.
But I do have to tell you, Mr. Goodrich, I ran almost as soon as I woke up. And I really wish I'd woken up sooner so that I could have prepped myself with more materials. There was a wealth of materials in your book. And I actually spent some time over in Europe, and I met some old people that were in the Wehrmacht, NSF. I went into some retirement homes and got some testimonials to how bad the gulags were in the Soviet Union. I've met people whose ancestors were East Prussian. There's a book I found from an East Prussian that migrated to the States, and I read the book, and it was heartbreaking. It was called Farewell Marienburg. And of course, I speak German, and I spent a year in gymnasium in Germany, and I wasn't woke to everything that was going on when I was over there going to school, but all I knew was they were the nicest people I'd ever met. I was like, how the heck could these people have done industrial masturbation machine roller coasters of death into ovens? There's no way. And so when I woke up, it all kind of clicked, and I was like, I do this for all people, but I do this especially for those kind Germans when I was a troubled youth that let me come over and really just enjoy a wholesome rural setting in a beautiful community with the best school. I learned more in the year I spent in Germany than I learned in all my high school in the United States. And I have to say, what we do, we don't just do for ourselves here in America. We do it for all free people. And those poor Germans...
Patrick, you're coming in and out. A little slower and like real... I don't know what you did like before. Are you moving around?
No, I'm actually on my boat. So
you are? Oh, okay. Well, there we go. That's probably why. Yeah, because it comes in and out, and that.
So as I was saying, the Germans were just so nice to me when I went and did my year over in German school, and when I woke up to the truth, and then compared that with the lies I had been told about the Germans, there was just a primal rage. How could these people who run the media, the banks, and all these major corporations controlling international kids, how could they say these terrible things about the Germans? And of course, everything falls together once you understand what the plan is. And when I read the protocols, it really came in perspective for me. But yeah, I just came out and said the truth, and that's ultimately the truth is like a sword. And we need people who are good at wielding it. And I'm hoping me just coming out like a tank charging into an anti-tank cannon that have inspired other people with better sets of chops, with better oration skills to come out and be those orators that step up and wield that sort of truth. Because I'm living it the best I can.
And break the spell of the PC culture and take the taboo out.
Absolutely. There should be no taboo in the truth.
Right.
He's doing that. That's what Patrick Little, that's exactly what he is doing. And the 2020 race, I haven't been following you lately, Patrick, but I hope you're still in that. I will certainly vote for you. I'll bring 20 votes your way. And I think with this coming year, 2019, you think back to 2018, 2017, how radically different it is, how much it's changed, how much we're gaining, how much we're winning. I think we can actually pull this thing off until you can become American president. I really do believe this. I was thinking very hard about that. I think you can do it because we're moving into that period right now where people desperately want the truth. And somebody like you who unflinchingly gives them the truth, tells them what the story really is, so many people are coming around to that. That's what this cyber world is all about, finding out the truth. Patrick is a guy that you might disparage him, you might vilify him, you might denigrate him, do a lot of things. It doesn't really matter. He comes back and back again. He's like an irresistible force and an immovable object put into human form. One man, Patrick Little, with that strange surname of Little, anything but Little. It should have been Patrick Large.
Right.
Actually, the name actually comes from LOY.
Where you're very muffled, Pat. And maybe if you could help me, if you could talk a little slower, so that it gives time for the voice to go through the systems and stuff. That's the only thing I could suggest to help out. I know you're on your boat, and that's probably the large problem of it. That's probably the cause.
When any cause targeting you, when you're on a boat, you can be a moving target.
Well,
Yeah, but what I was saying simply was that the truth is the truth, and it's like a sword, and orators are like swordsmen. The better, ultimately, a good swordsman with a poor sword is going to be able to beat 30 guys that are poor swordsmen with great swords. And so ultimately, we have the best sword, which is the complete opposite inverse of all of these lies that the tribe has been pushing.
so
Right.
I'm really hoping that more people step up that know the whole truth. And I might not know the whole truth yet, but I'm working on it. And I'm just doing this the best I can. And I'm saying if we present a shield wall of people wielding the truth as opposed to just a few stragglers here and there charging into the Zog's Marginal line, we can make some real impact with truth. And ultimately the truth will set people free and break the bonds of this propagandized shame.
You know, we're in an enviable position right now. Our enemies are coming right out and without hesitation telling us the way it really is. They're doing it in so many ways. You can see it. And we've got people like Patrick who is out there fighting every day. And the good news is it's not just Patrick Little. We're getting right now our best and brightest. They're coming in because they realize there's no other option. The only other option is to die. It's either fight and live or die. Simple as that. They put us in this position, and people like Patrick Little out there are telling us the way it really is. And a lot of people have to hear it first from someone like Patrick. They can think it forever, but until they hear someone saying it, that's the reason, Patrick, I'm really excited about 2020 and 2024, and you just keep doing what you're doing, brother, because it resonates. It's striking home. It's reaching hearts and minds right now. And like I said, the good news is you can actually go to bed at night in your boat and sleep, because there's other people in other time zones trying to do exactly what you're doing, and they're having really good results of it, I might say. You know as well as I do. You could start listing names right now, and we're talking some very impressive individuals. I could go through a list right now of people that will remain anonymous, but nevertheless, they're on our side, and they're doing what they can from where they're at without risking life and limb and jobs and families. They're still doing what they can. Now, let's call them guerrillas in the woods. Basically, they're fighting a guerrilla warfare, and that's the way they should be doing it. It's not everybody like Patrick who can come out and just stand there. I'm simply what I am. I'm here, and I won't shut up. Not everybody can do that. Unfortunately, if we had 1,000 more like Patrick, it'd be a walkover.
Right. I agree.
But that's how. I simply cannot tell you how appreciative I am for you, Patrick Little, for everything you've done and everything you shall do. I never felt more hopeful in my life than after I saw you. I won't say that I was an unbeliever, but I simply didn't recognize the strength that we have out there, the force and the determination. And like I said, what is left to us? We either fight now or we die. It's as simple as that. They've got it all charted up, they think. And they're really screwing up. I could use other words right now, but it's a family show. But they're really screwing up big time in this one. And good. I'm all for it. Just keep saying the things you're saying, doing the things you're doing, and we'll do the rest.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you for writing that book. I know many families, including some of the ones I became close with when I was living in Germany, that were displaced Silesian Germans, displaced Prussian Germans, displaced Czech Germans, and they lost everything. And they lost their families, those of them in the military watched their friends starve to death in the gulags after the war, and they lost everything. They came to what was left of Germany, which was only 60% of the size before World War I, with the shirts on their backs. And they rebuilt their country, even paying tribute to Israel, something like 5 or 10% of their GDP every year, and also maintaining our bases over there. I mean, these are very industrious, very good-hearted, very sociable people, and my heart goes out to the Germans, including Monica Schaefer and her brother, especially right now, Alfred Schaefer.
Monica's going to be on the show tomorrow, guys.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, she'll be here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Chicago time.
8 p.m. Chicago time.
Yep.
Okay. That'll be right after I get home. Hopefully I'll be out of traffic and back on the boat at that point. But yeah, if you're ever in the Bay Area, come sailing. The cities may be cozy around the bay, but I tell you, if you ever read Jack London, this is a beautiful day to go sailing on. I actually went to a bar a few nights ago that Jack London used to go frequent when he was a kid, and I picked up a postcard that I'm going to send to Dr. Duke because he sent me a signed copy of his book, Mutiny on the Elsinore, which is a metaphor for Jewish communism overthrowing first world countries, about a mutiny on a ship at sea, and how the Bolsheviks were beaten back. It's a metaphor. And London wrote about the golden age of San Francisco, the beauty of the awesome bay and the wind and the tall ships passing through here. And I got to tell you, it's quite a feeling in the middle of all of this HIV positive culture all around this body of water. There's still the serenity of the sea and the power of nature.
You're going to have to sail down here to the Gulf Coast of Florida, Patrick, around Tampa. That's where I live. And get out of the third world of California right now. It's as bad as Florida is. It's nothing like California. But, I want to go back a little bit to the Germans you met, the Germans I've met. Yes, I get it. Some of the nicest, kindest, most gentle, creative, inventive people on the face of the earth. And you can't take away from that. They were probably the leading stock in all of Europe. And that's part of the reason they had to go down, because they were not only turning things around, but here was the best and the brightest of all of Europe doing it. And as we both know, had they won that war, or had there been no war, they'd be on Mars right now. They'd be going beyond Mars. They'd be colonized by now. The world would have moved forward instead of backwards like we are right now.
Yeah, we aren't going to be able to reach the stars and get our people onto other planets, so to say, until we decolonize our government. Then we can colonize the stars.
Absolutely. You're right, yes. Until we disengage from this corrupt occupation government we've got right now, yes, it's going to be the same thing. Welfare, warfare, on and on forever and ever. We can't even keep our highways in good shape, much less even talk about going to the moon again or Mars. But also another thing about that war that I didn't realize when I was researching Hellstorm, but virtually everything that the Allies did, the crimes the Allies committed against Germany, they turned right around in occupation when they had control of all means of communication and blamed them all on the Germans doing the very same things they were doing.
And you have to remember, though, when you say the Allies, the troops didn't know. They were propagandized. There was no internet back then. And anyone, so Archibald Ramsay of the House of Lords, as well as one of his comrades that are a little bit more outspoken, was, of course, who was the British Union pacifist, what was his name? Oswald Mosley. These men spoke up and they were put in jail with the equivalent of a 1930s Patriot Act that the Jews passed in England at the time. So, and also, the troops here were propagandized. And I always emphasize the importance to people, if the Jews spend months every time there's going to be a demonstration somewhere propagandizing the police to give them a picture of us that they would like the police to have of us, then that means the Jews in their position of power realize the value of being perceived the right way by the people with the guns in their hands. And so when I say this with a very, very strong emphasis that we must reach out to the military and the police and tell them the truth. The best interactions I've had are with paramilitary guys, because they kind of shake the little worries out of you. They shake the dumb stuff. A lot of your NPC or non-aesthetic character or, conformist Jewish social norms that you have in your indoctrination camps fall off like fleas when you pass through the crucible of whether it's combat or technical training, or even just having a good hierarchical command structure where you're assigned responsibility. And ultimately, That's what we're trying to restore to our government, this responsibility and accountability, and not just this morass of swamp of Zionist shadow puppets being cast on the wall. Blame is constantly shifted, and new ministers and new cabinet members come in and do the same thing as the men before them. This is the same old story over and over again. And my goal is to help restore accountability to the American government and to win the hearts and minds of our men in uniform, whether it's police or military or National Guard, letting them know that I too was once used as a mercenary or a janissary for the Jews. Their terrible wars of attrition designed to grind down the Goyish populations of different nations. And they've used up so many young white men that now they have Goyim that are white grinding down in wars of attrition against peoples that aren't white, that are also Goyim. And we're grinding each other down in wars of attrition that are removing the noble blood from our populations, as those with the most noble blood fall, being the man that volunteers to speak to the IEDs. And essentially, we have the people in the Middle East and the people in America who should be removing this termite element from our government, killing each other instead of focusing on liberating their own nation. And I want to always keep an open hand and an arm out to those other nations of the world that want new freedom before Zionist occupation of our powerful countries that project Zionist power onto the rest of the world, and let them know that we know that what the Jewish-controlled State Department has done over the last 100 years constitute crimes against humanity.
Right.
We know
Right.
that all of these terrible things were done, but it wasn't done by the American people, and the American people that were gaslit into doing it in unison were brainwashed, just like I was. I used to hail Israel and go to evangelical church.
Mm-hmm. We also have another participant on our panel, Trav. Trav, you want to give a hello real quick?
Hello, Mr. Little. Honored to be on the podcast with you. Of course, same goes for the rest of the panel. Tom, maybe due to what we're interested in, but Tom was talking about truth, and Mr. Little was talking about truth, and I haven't independently verified this, but as far as I know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, "For a Jew, nothing is more insulting than the truth." So that came to mind. That came to mind.
Call him a Jew and watch how he carries. The word insult in the book he won't share. Just call him a Jew. And
I'd like to ask you all. I know we will win ultimately, but have we got the time to win before a false flag event stokes a war with Russia? Right. I know we are going to win. As you say, Patrick, the one thing we've got, our greatest weapon is the truth, and that's a lovely thing to have on your side. But are we going to have time? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's face it. We could wake up tomorrow morning and have a false flag event, and suddenly we're staring down the tubes, the nuclear tubes of Russia, for very good reason. So that's my only concern, is the time element here. Mm-hmm. We are going to win, and I think I'll even live long enough. As old as I am, I think I'll be around when we do win. But
I certainly hope.
we have to keep people aware of false flag events. That's what's kept us in continual white civil war for almost 100 years now. Well, for 100 years, for sure. Mm-hmm. And we've got to make people aware of false flags so that they don't fall for the Pearl Harbor anymore, or the Zimmerman Papers, or the Lusitania, or the Gulf of Tonkin, or things like that. Or 9/11, by the way, one of the biggest false flag, in my opinion, of all time. We've got to make sure people don't fall for this. The same thing goes for the gun grabbers. They continue with what a lot of folks think are false flag events. These shootings here and there in Las Vegas, schools and theaters, things like that. One great big shoot 'em up, like at the Super Bowl. Somebody comes in, 10 guys with all sorts of weapons, just killing hundreds, thousands of people, perhaps. Could that tip us? Could that tip it over, and basically the ugly powers that be yet in this nation say it's time to grab all the guns in America? Those are things that concern me. if the people understand false flag events, they'll be much less likely to leap like they did after Pearl Harbor or after 9/11 even. So informing people, educating them on false flag events is one of my big issues right now, obviously.
Yeah, I've really am afraid with this recent push of this bill. It's called S.1, and it's a 4-part bill, and part of that, they're trying to, it's basically an anti-BDS, anti-freedom of speech act, where if a business does participates in the BDS movement, then they're not entitled to the federal and state funds, and if they accept those funds and they continue with the BDS movement, then they can be fined up to $1 million and possibly jail time. So this is something huge, and I've been making a lot of streams about this. And this is not, that would only set a terrible precedent before we're going to end up like Monica Schaefer for wrong think and be political dissidents, and so, and I never thought I'd see this day would ever come.
Well, it certainly is dawning on us, this hellstorm that we might have to face here. We can almost see, as you called them in your book, the Christmas trees almost falling over the horizon, those red and green flares, as Mr. Goodrich so illustratively wrote about in his great book, Hellstorm, which if you're listening to this and you voted for me, or you're thinking about voting for me at one point, you've got to read Hellstorm. But I would do it before you go on vacation, because you might not be able to work the next day. By the way, can I say, when I read Hellstorm, I was... when I first saw the summary video, and I read the book later on my way back and forth from the American Freedom Party conference, I read it on the plane, I was fasting. I was on my 5th day of fasting. I was doing a water fast. I was trying to get my blood pressure down, and also it helps with your focus and your brain cognition and all that. And I read that, and fasting can be pretty stressful. And when I read that book, and I just realized, they have laws against speech afterwards and all that. And you're seeing what they did to these people, and then blame these people for what was done to them, the victim blaming and then the victim shaming.
Right.
And it's like the worst rape in history, and then the worst victim blaming in history. And they didn't just blame the actual individual victim that was the German people, metaphorically, one person being represented by people. They blamed every European nation. Everyone. Mm-hmm. But there are some positive signs. Poland has passed a law against Holocaust shaming its population. Did you know that?
No.
That happened last year. Yeah, Israel was pissed.
It's really gotten out of control, and but moving on. But
the bill in English pretty much says it's illegal to blame Polish people for any type of Holocaust. Do you realize, Mr. Goodrich, what a major victory that is?
Now, I missed a few words there, and I wasn't quite sure what you're asking. Yes, I am familiar with that. Yes, I don't think it's I don't think it's an aberration that it would be Poland or Hungary or some other nation that's still maintaining its borders, its freedom. Yes, it is. Yes, it's quite a wonderful victory, and there are more ahead, I'm sure.
And the Germans are looking jealously over their borders over to Poland, saying, we want that too. And the Volkswagen, have you met Mr. Nering? Have you heard of Mr. Nering, the Volkswagen, the people teacher in Germany?
No, I'm not. I don't think so.
He does good work.
Well, the Jews are about to take down my campaign channel against FEC laws giving undue consideration to my competitors, but doesn't stop them in the past. But if you go to my YouTube channel, Global Revolution, about 2 months ago, I did a translation of an interview a Jewish reporter did, sitting down with Mr. Nering, the Volkswagen, who gives like history lessons in public squares, which includes crime scenes. And they sat down, and the interview ended, and the Jew said to Mr. Nering, I'm just so glad that most Germans don't think like you. And then the folks, Mr. Manning, looks at him for just a moment. By the way, I translated this from German to English for you, so you can watch my narration of it. The folks turns to the Jew and says, "Yes, well, unfortunately, most Jews are like you." And he said that in German. He's not in jail. The Goyim are waking up. Sometimes we've got to take some of the red pills. Some of the white pills along with the red pills and the black pills. It's glorious that happened. Because what was the Jew going to do? Throw him in prison for him not having power? It was like a verbal version of the assault smirk launched by the Covington schoolboy. But there are good things. I think I'm lucky in that I was not awake during a time, where I got, a lot of life in before I woke up. And it looks like you're looking down the gun of the barrel of the Jewish gun. I understand. You've been awake for a long time, and I understand that Ryan Dawson, one of my buddies who has informed me quite a bit about Jewish terrorism against Western nations, including the United States, was one of the first people to interview you over in the 90s after you published your book in, 98, 99?
It was a long time ago, I know that. I don't go back that far, quite honestly. But yeah, Ryan's another one of the guys that I consider one of the people who's making a difference, making a change. But like I said,
I wouldn't talk about 9/11 publicly until he debriefed me on the event, because I didn't know what to make of all of the misinformation out there, and he cut through the misinformation. What do they call it when they put up a fog of war so you don't know what the truth is, like with the JFK assassination, all the obfuscation. He cut through all of the obfuscation. Ryan Dawson was like the rising sun over the fog, burnt off the fog, and left only the truth there that was really easily verifiable, and it painted such a concise picture of Jewish terrorism that's easily proven without any of the bits that sound like tinfoil, and it just has been such a powerful sort of truth, 9/11 truth. You don't need to go into any of the things that aren't easily provable to red pill people. You can stick to the stuff that's easily provable, and that's very powerful.
Right. How long ago did you read Hellstorm, Patrick?
So I first saw the film Hellstorm from, I forget the name of the company. They're kind of black-pilled. They're a little bit cynical. They've been awake for a long time, though, I think. I forget the channel that made it, but I forget. It'll come to me later. But I read it on my way back and forth from the American Freedom Party conference, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, about 5 years ago?
No, I didn't wake up until late October, early November 2016.
Oh my gosh. You late bloomer.
I started running a year after I woke up.
You're a late bloomer.
I used to go to evangelical church and stuff in Florida before I joined the military.
Okay.
And, I went there trying to become a better young man, because I spent some of my 20s kind of just, chasing women and,
right. That's
not
okay.
Really getting
right.
And so, I didn't know the Jews controlled the Zionist evangelical churches, so I said, okay, I'll go to this evangelical church, this Baptist church, or this Lutheran church, and I'm going to become a good citizen, and I'm going to become marriage material, and they brainwash the ever-living
shit out of you. Yeah, they do. And Mike, how long did it take you to write Hellstorm?
3 years.
3 years. Yeah, and you did a really excellent job, I have to say. Where did you find all of these first-person accounts in your stories here?
Of course, there are some very good books out there that were published through mainstream press. A few of them got some good stuff in there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of those out there. But oddly enough, it was a few books that I'd never heard of before. One of them, I can't think of the title right now, but it was some priests in the eastern parts of Germany after the war.
Wow.
Had the courage to talk to their parishioners, had the honesty and decency to go out and find out what really happened to the person on the street.
Right.
And they actually jotted that down and printed it into a large book, and it was just full of hair-raising events. And I got a lot from that. A lot of it from coffee tables or breakfast tables in the morning, talking to people who are in this nation now, the U.S. They had to get out of Germany, of course,
Right.
if they wanted to live. And I talked to quite a few of those people. Let's don't forget, I was researching this in the 90s.
Right.
And so a lot of those folks are still alive and still functional.
That's awesome. So you had the opportunity to interview the survivors of that.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
What a wow.
Well,
Yeah, that's just got to be so. How did you feel when you were? How did you feel when you were putting all this together?
Oh, I wouldn't. Okay, I don't want to go too far over, but I've never been the same since. It's an easy statement to make. I had never even dreamed of such things going on happening to a people, much less realizing that it actually did happen. Some of the most terrible crimes committed against anyone, anywhere. If there's something worse than that, I don't want to know about it, because honestly, I've never been the same since, and I hate to go into all the reasons or all the things that happened to me. Well, first of all, I can tell you, I was an alcoholic. I went back to smoking. I'd been on smokeless tobacco. I know Patrick vapes a lot, but I was on Copenhagen and Skoal for a while.
I'm sorry to say that I'm back on the cigarettes. I had a very bad motor accident where some guy rear-ended me in a car 4 times the size of mine, or mass of mine. And I got very bad whiplash because the speed differential was like 40-something miles per hour because he was speeding. And I had a concussion, and I could barely speak more than a sentence at a time, and my short-term memory was gone from October 19th until about a month ago.
That was your concussion, right, Patrick?
Yeah, it was really bad. That's why I disappeared. I could. The worst part was I couldn't even read for the most part until like 2 months ago, even.
So, Mike, it sounds to me that you, and this is very normal. And I worked as a registered nurse for 18 years. So you peer into the life of some people, and sometimes you yourself it's kind of called like caregiver trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, because these stories are so bad. That I can imagine that you may have felt something like that, or?
Yes, because unfortunately, I'm someone who absorbs those around me. I tend to, for good or bad, I tend to, it gets in my soul, my mind, my blood, that I actually was a woman being raped 100 times. A week in wherever on the Western Front, Eastern Front, doesn't matter. Or I was trying to get away in a terrible fire. I can imagine. I have a very good imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, because these bombs that they were dropping with 3 or 4 types of bombs. One of them was incendiary bombs. And what is an incendiary bomb for?
To start fires.
To keep it going, to make it hotter?
Yes.
To start the fire, yeah.
Yeah, well, it keeps it going, right? It makes it like, it feeds it, I think, right?
So they have the high-yield, larger bombs for breaking down the wooden superstructures of a lot of the buildings. And once that's all become a pile of timber, at that point they do incendiary attack, and then they pass over again with the high-yield explosives to stir everything up to blow the dust off of the embers, and then they light it right back up again.
I have them written down here. Just have to find it real quick. They had 3 or 4 types of bombs. They had aerial mines. They had 11-ton blockbuster bombs and that was just to flatten areas. Special delayed activation devices, and those would penetrate the buildings. Okay, so they would penetrate the buildings, and then it wouldn't explode though on impact. It would explode after it got into the buildings and in the basement and the shelter area. So they were basically bombs made to tear up the shelters. And then you had incendiaries. On top of all this, and the heat was so great that it actually pulled people up off the street and into these flames, and other people, their clothes would burst off, just start on fire, and many of them were naked because of the intense heat.
Yeah, the subtitle of my most recent book, Germany, Japan, and the Harvest of Hate, that is summer 1945. A lot of people don't realize it happened to Japan too. The hate was so great among the Allies, and the knowledge of victory was so sure that they didn't give a damn about what they did to these nations. They loved doing it. It was fun. It was fun. It was like modern, pre-modern video games. No, they enjoyed it. Now, these bombs you're talking about, these are demonic type of bombs. These are anti-personnel bombs. These are bombs that are not headed for factories or industry, thing like that. That's just to dehouse and murder the civilians down below.
That's right.
And that's all this was. It was the most sadistic war in human history. Nothing even comes close to this. And, I think it's part of the Morgenthau Plan continuing this sadism that's being shown against Japan and Germany, is that we're going to destroy them utterly. I'm talking about the Germans now, the Morgenthau Plan. Destroy them utterly, every man, woman, and child.
And that was the Germany must perish, correct?
But ultimately, haven't you read Hitler? People believe what they are told. People are easily propagandized. Bernays set this whole story using the groundwork that he set in that was set by Pavlov. When people are propagandized, most people don't independently arrive at what the right or wrong thing to do is. It's only a few people that are kind of holistic, autodidactic learners that independently arrive at what is good and bad. Most people need social norms to keep them in line. And when the social norm and the highest virtue being put out by the Jews is to slaughter every man, woman, and children because they're making soap and doing roller coasters of death and masturbation machines to Jews, I mean, I hardly blame the Allies. I blame the Jews.
Well, of course, because they're the ones in control. But here's the thing. This is typical of psychopathic behavior, okay? There's no remorse, and there's no empathy. And they will absolutely... And psychopaths enjoy the process of torturing people, okay? So, and we see this pattern of behavior whether you're, in a war like World War II, or if you're in an abusive relationship. The process is the same, okay? So we all have to kind of remember who we're dealing with, and always remember when you're assessing a situation, and you're seeing this, in the propaganda, they don't feel guilty about lying to these people. They don't feel guilty, lying to these people.
Jews
that's
on
the
average
thing.
Don't have a sense of shame or guilt. That is what sociopathy is. If you read the book, The 10,000-Year Explosion, it explains how they adapted to become like this through heterozygous adaptations for verbal acuity and lack of that moral part of the brain. That's how Jews push filth without guilt. That's how they profit off from the festering wounds of society that they keep open.
Now,
they wouldn't be able to do what they did if they didn't have these mental disorders.
That's right, exactly. And Operation Gomorrah was the name of that post. Basically, I'll call it post-war massacre that Dresden and Munich and the few other German towns that the pilots just kept coming and coming, and there was nothing left to bomb, but they kept bombing it anyway. And I have to say that I really admire your courage, Mike, and your persistence and tenacity to keep, when you're having to deal with this almost on a first-hand basis, and you're putting all this together, and you could have easily quit at any time, and you chose not to.
Yeah, that's true. But I had never been motivated like I had with Hellstorm. No other book motivated me as much as that. I knew, the acknowledgement is dedicated to the voiceless victims of the world's worst war. And after a while, after you start gathering this research, this information about what people went through on a personal basis, there's some point where you just pray to God you don't die before this book is finished, because you're going to conclude it, you're going to finish it, you're going to go all the way through. I've got to say something here. Trav, I should explain, is a comrade. He's a buddy of mine, and Trav is going to start reading passages from Hellstorm and putting it on YouTube, I think.
Awesome.
I hope he does, but that's what his offer is for me, and I think it's a great thing. But Trav is a Gen Xer. I believe that's the terminology for it, and he's rather new to the movement. He did reach critical mass a few years ago, and I predict at some point Trav's going to be one of our exalted leaders. He's got everything going for him, and he's got the energy, the drive, the youth, and he's got the anger, just like we all have. Well, it came upon Trav, just like it's coming upon now millions of people.
Right.
Trav, am I saying everything correctly? Am I getting that straight?
The exalted leader or any kind of, I'm okay with a servant. You know, I want to do the work just like we all do. You've got seemingly infinite optimism, but no, I wouldn't claim any leadership, but I want to do work just like other people do.
That's all we can hope for. But I think I know Trav pretty well by this time, and we're talking about a very intelligent guy, energetic. But again, you were red-pilled. Is that the term right now we're using, red-pilled? Trav?
Yeah. It might have been around when Mr. Little was sometime.
Yeah.
It's been a process over a few years, and the red pills just keep coming, really. But yeah, I'd say a couple years, and I think it was Hellstorm that played a pretty big role, seeing that, and it's a never-ending process, really.
And then somebody like Patrick Little comes along, and he's saying what you're thinking.
Right.
And that's an instant red pill for almost anybody.
Have you heard the Ash conformity experiment? So the more people that do what I'm doing, the more effective it'll be. 2 people doing what I'm doing is more than twice as effective as just me doing it, because if you look at the Ash conformity experiment, compliance with what the group tells you to do goes down from 95% down to like 12 or 15% if there's a second person in the room speaking the obvious truth. Look up the Ash conformity experiment on YouTube. It's a 4-minute long video. It demonstrates this. This is a reproducible experiment. You'll get the same results. The Jews are professionals at this stuff, and that's why they do censorship and try and make everyone feel like they're the only ones having these thoughts.
Isolation is there one of the
tactics. I highly encourage anyone, anyone, please join me in doing what I'm doing. Run for Senate, run for office, run for president too. Please, everyone.
How long have you, Trev, how long have you been working with Mike?
Maybe it's only since last summer or something. And my work's been limited so far, but we've been in touch, and I hope to do some things. But yeah, I'd say maybe since last summer.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Trav's the classic example of the person I have in mind, the guerrilla warrior from the woods, the guy who has. I prefer. Of course, we all want to see a 1,000,000-man army marching along, and we're taking cities and we're controlling things. That may not happen as long as the other side still controls the military. But there's many things people like Trav can do, and they're doing it. Trav is doing it well, I think.
The military can be won from the bottom up, by the way.
Yes, there you go. That's wonderful. Yes, but there's other ways. Become the best person you possibly can be, mentally, spiritually, intellectually, morally, of course. That's a common approach to it. Just become the best you possibly can, because ultimately you're making us better by making us stronger. By making yourself stronger, we become stronger, unavoidably. And then begin to do things that are. I've written books on guerrilla warfare, and here I'm at a loss for words that describe what I want to say about guerrilla warfare. But you can do many great things from hiding or from anonymity, from secrecy. And that's the best you can do. We don't want you to lose your job or to risk your family or to be living under a bridge. That's not going to help us at all if you become a drunk and just hang out at Skid Row. Never allow yourself to come to that level, ever. Stay in charge. Stay in charge of your own life. And then do what you can for our side, because ultimately that's your side, and you either do it or we're through. We're through as a people, as a race, as the most inventive, the most creative, the most intelligent, the most imaginative, the most courageous, the most adventurous race the world has ever known will be no more. And we're not going to allow that to happen, none of us. The
That's
four of us
right.
here are determined that is never going to happen. Unfortunately, we've got an enemy that's persistent but not too intelligent. They create so many mistakes. It's so easy to use those mistakes too, and they're doing it right now. They cannot seem to help it. I know there's a history among them of pushing the envelope when they didn't have to. Well, they're doing it now big time. I mean, it's there for anyone to see, and people like Patrick Little are pointing these things out to people, and they're suddenly saying, yeah, I know, I see exactly what he's saying. Well, Trav, people like that can do the same thing anonymously. They can make the world of difference, and I'm happy to say Trav's one of those guys, and I look for nothing but good things from Trav. Whether anybody knows about it or not, he's going to do great things. So, and we've got millions of people coming along just like Trav, red pill, black pill, you name it.
Being anonymous, I can say I sent Mr. Little money in his campaign, and I try to support
awesome
Mike here, and do all kinds. Everybody has a role to play. When I was a kid, GI Joe was in the. This is a vision I have sometimes. Speaking of sort of guerrilla warfare in the modern day, GI Joe was on the on TV, or there was movies, and Cobra. Turns out, of course, the bad guys were the good guys. Seems to me, that's in my mind anyway. And the Cobra guys were like. The Cobra guys were secret warriors that had their Cobra uniforms in the closet, and they were ready at any time. They were living their normal lives, and they were ready to pull those uniforms out of the closet and go, do what they had to do when the time was right. And that's sort of how I feel sometimes. I got my stuff in the closet. I'm living my normal life as I'm forced to, sustaining myself, able to support other people that are doing good work, and I know who I am.
Yep.
That takes a lot of strength. When I woke up, everyone, I met with some people, some groups, and they said, all right, dude, get into position to do something like do the whole white taquilla thing. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep showing up to work. I had to tell the world, and it's very hard for me to compartmentalize this from the rest of my life. It consumed me, and there were different types of personalities, and whatever you can do to help wake people up, or help people that are out trying to take power, or just anything. Just as long as we're not black-pilled. I saw in the chat, as everyone gets a half cup of water out of the sinking boat, we'll have the bilge empty in no time, and that's absolutely true. And the Jews, what they do is they demoralize, they cause infighting, they convince you to be nihilistic and to give up, and just everything's bad, like a child in a tantrum. That's how they want us, and just remember that.
There's a quick question in the chat for Trav. Scyther Mantis wants to know how people can get in touch with you. Now, I think Mike, you were saying something about a YouTube channel, but Trav, do you know, are there plans in the near future here?
I haven't thought. I've got different accounts. Somebody might have seen in the chat. There's a email in there that you can email to. So I don't have any produced videos yet.
Okay, but the people who want to follow your work or whatever, they want to know how they can keep in touch with you, or is there something we could, maybe a link or whatever we could put in the description of this video?
Yeah, maybe we can do that. I need to I need to figure out which channel.
Okay, we'll do that then. So when you have that set, I'll go ahead and at a later date then and put that in.
Okay, great.
Because we all stick together and keep focus, and it's one goal, and that's to get the truth out. And anything else is a private matter. The labels that divide us, they create labels to that does nothing but push people away from each other. We don't care. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care who you want to have sex with. I don't care about any of that. All I want is for everybody to focus on, and this is one of the reasons why I started this channel, because it allows me to pour my energy out and do what I can, because I'm not going to go down without fighting. And We need to keep the goal in sight, and that is to make sure that we fight as long as we can and as hard as we can to keep the truth out and to reverse this imbalance of power.
I would go further and call it tyranny, and I
Right.
did also just want to quickly thank Travis for his support. I'm actually doing FEC paperwork. Actually, I'm a few days late, but I let him know I was going to be late. I hate doing the accounting. But thank you so much for your support, by the way, and I look forward to hearing more from you, Travis. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Goodrich. I just wanted to get that in there.
Well, this is a little off the subject, but I want to encourage everyone listening to heed your instincts. Your instincts have been misdirected. They've been short-circuited. Most people have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that inner voice that if you allow it, if you're quiet enough at times, let's say in the morning, early morning before you get up, or at night before you go to bed, really research yourself and what you want in life and what is correct in life, what is honest about life. Really think about things like that, and suddenly you'll start realizing you do have an instinct. And when you finally figure that out and you feed that instinct, when you allow that instinct to control your life, when our ancestors had had great instincts because they listened to them, they worked with them. But once you allow your instinct, and I mean your honest instinct, after you realize that this is exactly what I want, it's what I'm thinking, then you're not going to be so persuaded by the propaganda the next time. In other words,
Right.
we're talking about our enemy, who, as Patrick mentioned, has a long history in circumventing that instinct of ours, of turning us against ourselves.
Right.
For God's sakes, Americans killing their brothers in Germany, their cousins, literally. And it's not going to be so easy the next time to convince you of some other thing. For instance, this constant war they're trying to stoke with Russia, that's this World War III. Well, that's just going to be White Civil War III. That's what that's going to be. We'll be killing more white people. And that's perfect. That works out perfect for these people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, getting us to fight these wars for them.
Right.
Mr. Goodrich,
Yes.
I think that's a possibility, but I've been studying the tribe a lot lately, really focusing on what they have done in terms of telegraphing what they do, and their goal is a war with Islam. They want Christians versus Islam, and if you don't believe me, look at all of the different forms of acceptable right-wing activity that the Jews will condone. It's all anti-Islam.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. They want to mix a bunch of Muslims to Europe and keep them as their own ghettoized population, incite them against us and incite us against them, and that I think is their plan. I believe it's in the protocols and some of the other major Jews that were involved with some of the B'nai Brit lodges and other stuff. That is their goal, and it also lines up with what is a priori or a posteriori detectable from their media. You can see it in the media. And if you also look, the Jews that wrapped themselves in the flag of their country doing the my fellow Australian or my fellow Irishman or my fellow German shit, they're always Jews that push nationalism for their for the country that the indigenous people around them are from. They always push nationalism plus anti-Islam.
But you know, Patrick, wouldn't you agree that this non-stop war that we're fighting for Israel since 2001 is in essence our attack? I'm not going to call it World War III, but that we have done their bidding. We have went over there, we've bombed, we've blasted, we've occupied, we've disgusted these people, we pipe in our porn for them. I'm talking about Israel mostly. That basically that's an occupied, just like Germany was occupied after the war.
And
we're
it
still
still is occupied.
Yes, we're still there. We're still doing the bidding. You know, I've heard that in the numerous CIA torture pins around the globe, Hebrew is the language of choice. I've heard that. Now, I don't know from personal experience, but in other words, that's what the occupiers do after they've taken control of this thing. Now, this thing with Russia, though, yes, they want everything except what they really want, Iran. And probably the only way to get Iran now, to get rid of Iran, that is, in Syria, is by getting rid of Russia. That's my thought. And of course, that means another white civil war with Russia, U.S. and Europe. Just to finish off this. Anyway, I've said enough on that because when I get out of the history books, away from my history, then I'm just shooting from the hip. But again, that's my thoughts, my instinct, if you will.
Right.
That's their optimal scenario. That's what they want. They want whites killing whites.
Right.
Yes,
but
yes.
As long as they can get us on at least one side of the fight, they're happy. They'd be really happy if they can get whites killing whites, but it's looking like they're going to keep on. They're trying to stoke a little bit of like anti-Islam, Pamela Geller-Tier, Robert Spencer Tier, Jihad Watch style, kosher nationalism. And what they want is just fight Goyim fight. They prefer it if it's white Goyim fighting white Goyim. But ultimately, anytime there's a battle going on, and so long as Jews are in power and there's a battle going on and Jews aren't on one side of that battle, we're fighting for the Jews.
Change subject a little bit. Europe, are they finally getting a handle on this flooding of their nations over there? Are they finally? I'll say this, Patrick. I lived in Europe this past year. I was living in Germany and Denmark, and I got around a little bit. It does seem like it's turning right now, big time, as a matter of fact.
It is, but they need more people speaking openly in public because it's mostly people knowing behind closed doors. I denied the Holla hoax the whole time I was in Austria and Germany the last time.
You're lucky you didn't get arrested.
Well, no. There were police, there were prison guards, there were field grade officers in the Bundeswehr, which is the Austrian Federal Army. They all know, and all of the police had FPÖ, which is Freiheitspartei Österreich, the Austrian Freedom Party, which is the ones where everyone's been getting kicked out of lately because they were recorded in the 90s or 2000s singing National Socialist songs. These people are truly woke. The AFP, at least, I think there was a purge where they got rid of Landbauer from a district near Vienna. He was the real deal, and all of the police that I met were voting for Udo until the Jews made him step down. He was running for a seat, and I believe in a Landtag or a provincial legislature, and they're the real deal. And there are also a lot of people from the AfD in Germany that the Jews are forcing out because they've been able to track down through social media and stuff pictures of them drinking a bottle of wine that has Hitler's face on it or something. They know this is like Tucker Carlson. He knows. They're waiting for more people to wake up. I think there were already enough people woken up. I think just a yellow jacket needs just to stand up and say, it's the Jews. But
Trav, weren't you in Germany a while ago? I know you speak German, but weren't you over there?
Yeah, I lived there for a number of years going to school. During school, I often think back on this guy. I worked as a movie man on the side, and it was like, I won't mention the city, but it wouldn't be surprising that there were some communists there and some old neo-Nazis. And I used to have conversations with this neo-Nazi guy, and he would say, it wasn't 6 million. And I had this is
Amen.
a couple decades before I was anywhere close to having anything about not being a PC. And I would say, well, how many was it? And isn't it bad if it's just one and all this? But man, what I wouldn't give to go back and find that guy and say, you were right, you are right, I'm sorry. And then on other Germans, I keep in touch with some old schoolmates. They all went to university, and sadly, it's near impossible to talk. One German girl, beautiful girl, speaks French and English, and she's dedicating herself to being a Volkslehrer actually. And but she's an NPC. And I asked her, she says all this stuff. She sends all these emails, and I'm trying to wake her up, and I say, I forget what it was, like anything you see where a German boy was raped by some Muslim immigrants and ridiculed because he is German. And I send her this stuff, and she says, I didn't see that, or I'm busy with my school. So it's sad. It's real sad for me. There's a lot of people that still need to be woken up.
Well, yeah, I see a lot of the... Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I see a lot of the finest people in Germany with those very social instincts. And if you talk to a lot of Germans, you understand what they mean by the word social, as in social behavior, like the opposite of antisocial. A lot of the most social people, their energies are all being directed towards, as soon as you're done with gymnasium, go to Africa and go through an apprenticeship program on helping migrants. And then once you're done with that, building the empathy for them instead of your own people, then come here and into the bureaucracy and become one of the social workers that make sure they get all of the social welfare money from the country here. And then figure out how to become an expert in bringing them in and getting them into compliance. And their mission, these German, these Austrian mothers that could be just the most wonderful providers and loving nurturers, are then essentially have everyone except the people from their own country at their teat. And that's the saddest part, is really the female element being poisoned so badly, so badly. I've run into many Austrians and Germans, and they are like we were 10 years ago, where white women wouldn't consider having a child before 35 if they had a decent education. They're about 10 years behind where we are right now. So their cultural Marxism is just now peaking, whereas here it kind of peaked in the general population and then continued its trajectory with its inertia towards radical environmentalism, and I mean that by Marxist environmentalism, saying nothing is nature, everything's nurture. Whereas the other half is kind of just has fissured off and has been radicalizing in the other direction, which is good. Fanatics are needed. But what I'm saying is they are just now beginning to get those fissures, and but they're at peak pause right now. They are about as bad as they're going to get in terms of the common everyday indigenous German or Austrian right now.
Germany not only lost the world's most devastating war, they suffered the worst defeat known to man, but of course the peace was no better. And it's been 70 years now, over 70 years. And the Germans have been at war ever since the so-called end of the war, the peace. They have been occupied, they've been propagandized, they've been, let's just say what it really is. They've been hypnotized into believing that they're the curse of the earth. Everywhere you go, every movie you see, they are always the evil ones, the bad ones. And that cannot help but seep in eventually and convince you that you have no place in this world.
They actually have a word for that, Mr. Goodrich. It's called Weltschmerzen, world pain.
Yeah, well, yes, and I've heard so many people, and I think they're well-meaning people, quite honestly, if ignorant, but they say, look, the Germans won't help themselves, so why should we worry about them? The Germans are sissies. They're feminists.
That's victim blaming.
Yes, and they're communists now. They're two things like that. Well, hey, look, you go through a defeat and an occupation and a peace like the Germans have gone through, I guarantee you're going to come out something like that yourself.
You know what the most common phrase I heard from the survivors of World War II were? The most common phrase was "Nie wieder Krieg," never again war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was so bad. The idea of ever having to stand up for themselves, they're like a beaten dog. And it is it is so bad. It is like a dog in a cage being tortured and broken. And seeing it happen and realizing, I'm not German, and I'm actually a large percentage of Western European, so I'm more like your Celtic and Irish and such. But going there and seeing the majesty of that species of man, these Germans, they truly, it was like going into a tropical rainforest and seeing the most beautiful animals existing in harmony, and they had no idea how special that they were. And I constantly told them in German, "Ich bewundere euch." I am just in awe of you people, and their Hausstolz, their pride for their houses, how they keep them clean, and even the shame they would feel from not keeping their house painted, or even in the poorest areas. These are very proud, very independent people, and these people don't take welfare when they would be making more to go on welfare. They'd do better on the dole than they would to work. And instead, they sacrifice having children so they can have the pride of work and a sense of dignity. And you just watch. Have you read Animal Farm by Orwell?
Yes.
Do you remember the loyal horse that stayed true to the power structure right through the end until they took him away in the glue truck?
Yeah, alas, yes.
Okay, that's the Germans. They are the horses. They are literally, okay, well, the windmill fell over twice, but I don't have enough food to get through the winter, but I'm going to go ahead and expend all my energy trying to get this windmill built to save the rest of the world. That is what they are. And it was now thinking back on my experiences there and just their shame and just how I had to hold myself back from exploiting them, because they pretty much throw themselves at anyone that's not German and say, come take what I have, what can I do for you? Let's go shooting, I'll pay for the bullets. And you try and insist, no, I'll pay for the bullets. Or they go out to a restaurant and they won't let you pay. And they do this with pretty much anyone that's not German. They've been conditioned to this. They have to give away everything that should belong to the progeny to foreigners. And I felt shame being there, taking up a German student's seat while I was in Germany, knowing that a young German child could be there, and just knowing that they would give me anything. And they would, any of them in that school, the children, the parents, the teachers, they would have given me anything if I asked for it. And I wasn't of them. I wanted them to be selfish. For the love of God, I said, be proud to be German. Even before I woke up to the Jews, it didn't add up. And I was saying, be proud to be German. You guys are wonderful. Like, you guys, somebody sing a nationalist song so I can learn it. What's going on?
Right.
No, you're coming to me asking for me to speak English with you so I can tell you what the meaning of this new pop song is. And I say it's poison. I didn't know the Jews were behind it, but I said, this is poison.
Right.
Why don't you tell me about your folkish festival? Tell me about Krampus, or tell me about St. Nicholas, depending on what part of Germany you are. Show me your festivals. Take me to your wineries. Take me to your breweries. Take me to the graveyards, the cathedrals. Show me Germany. I'm in here. I'm trying to immerse myself in this beautiful thing coming from the cultural vacuum that is Jewish-controlled America.
Right.
And you have something so beautiful that is clearly evaporating here, and it's so sad to watch.
Right.
And I could not communicate to them what they had, and they wouldn't believe me when I tried. And this was 20 years before I woke up, and I was in Germany for September 11th, by the way, and they're like, oh, no, don't go to war, America. War is so bad. It's like a dog that gets beat every time it hears a whistle. They heard a whistle when they saw,
Very well said.
a cause for war, and they just like, don't do it. It ends bad.
Right.
These people are so industrious, so loving, so good.
They really are. They're so. I after reading your book, Mike, Hellstorm, I am so impressed by their resolve. They will dig in, and they will persevere, and that's the German spirit. And I'm very happy to see that spark coming back again, I'm German. I'm mostly German. I want to learn German. I got 2 apps down there, on my phone. And growing up in America, I thought to myself as a kid, I'm like, my culture's so boring.
I can list a bunch of films that are in German with English subtitles. Watch them in German with English subtitles, and then watch them in English with German subtitles, and vice versa. That's how you learn.
All right, I'll hit you up after the show for the things. But I wanted to end, because we're going to go to the Q&A soon, and give our audience an opportunity to ask their burning questions for you, Mike. But while I was reading Hellstorm, I said, there's just no way I can put this into words. So there's just, I think, 3 clips I wanted to show, and this will impress upon everybody the awful. I can't even put into words the suffering that they endured. So we're going to go ahead and turn to YouTube, and somebody put your movie up. And we're at minute mark, 1 hour, 11 minutes, 46 seconds. Okay?
Let me say this
first.
It's not my movie. Kyle Hunt of Renegade Broadcasting did almost all the work. All the money he put into it. It's almost all Kyle Hunt of Renegade Broadcasting. I wrote the script. I did a few voice pieces, but it's all Kyle Hunt. I think he did a great job with very little funds.
Right. Right. All right. Let's begin. I'm going to turn the volume on here and.
Germans, male and female, the odds of surviving the Soviet gulags were even worse than escaping the American death camps. A trip to Siberia was tantamount to a death sentence. What little food the slaves received was intended merely to maintain their strength until they were worked to death. Much the same might be said of the 600,000 German slaves held by the French. Ultimately, no fewer than 800,000 German prisoners died in the American and French death camps. Indeed, recent estimates place the death toll at upwards of 1.5 million. And thus, in peace, did Eisenhower murder at least 10 times the number of German soldiers than were killed on the whole Western Front during the whole of the war. With the once mighty Wehrmacht now disarmed and enslaved, and with their leaders either dead or awaiting trial for war crimes, the old men, women, and children who remained in the dismembered Reich now found themselves utterly at the mercy of the victors. Unfortunately, never in the history of the world was mercy in shorter supply. Soon after their victory in Europe, the Allied purge of Nazi Party members commenced. In theory, denazification was a simple transplanting of party officials with those of democratic, socialist, or communist underpinnings. In practice, the purge became little more than a cloak for rape, torture, and death. All adult Germans were compelled to register at the nearest Allied headquarters and complete a lengthy questionnaire on past activities. While many nervous citizens were detained then and there, most returned home, convinced that their terrible ordeal was over. For millions, however, the trial had just begun. Few German adults, Nazi or not, escaped the dreaded knock on the door. Many people were arrested multiple times, including Leni Riefenstahl, a talented young woman who was perhaps the world's most artistic filmmaker. Because her epic documentaries, Triumph of the Will and Olympia, seemed to glorify not only Germany but National Socialism, and because of her close relationship with an admiring Adolf Hitler, Leni was of great interest to the Allies.
Neither my husband nor my mother nor any of my 3 assistants had ever joined the Nazi Party, nor had any of us been politically active. No charges had ever been filed against us, yet we were at the mercy of the Allies and had no legal protection of any kind.
As Leni and others quickly discovered, the softening up process began soon after the arrival at an Allied prison. Brutally beaten, raped repeatedly, crammed into dark, overheated cells, victims nervously awaited their interrogations.
What is it?
The purpose of these interrogations is not to warn other people what they do, which would be uninteresting anyway, but to extort from them special statements. The methods resorted to are extremely primitive. People are beaten up until they confess to having been members of the Nazi Party. The authorities simply assume that basically everybody has belonged to the party. Many people die during and after these interrogations, while others who admitted once their party membership are treated more leniently.
Generally, after enduring blackened eyes, broken bones, rape, electric shock to the breasts, or in the case of men, smashed testicles, only those who took their own lives or died during torture failed to sign confessions. Since most intelligence officers accompanying U.S. and British forces were Jewish refugees who had fled Germany in the 1930s, their knowledge of the language and culture was superb. With old scores to settle, the presence of these men ensured that there would be no mercy shown to Nazis, or any German for that matter.
Both officers who took our testimony were former German Jews. One kicked me in the back and the other hit me. The terrible thing was, the German men had to watch. That was a horrible, horrible experience. That must have been terrible for them. When I went outside, several of them stood there with tears running down their cheeks. What could they have done? They could do nothing.
During the Nazi war crimes trial at Nuremberg, almost any method that would obtain a confession was employed. Understandably, after several such sessions, even the strongest submitted and signed papers incriminating themselves and others. In addition to testimony given under torture, those who might have spoken in defense of the accused were threatened with torture and death themselves. Moreover, hired witnesses were paid by the Americans to parrot the prosecution's charges. Horrific as denazification was in the British, French, and especially the American zones, it was nothing compared to what took place in Poland behind Soviet lines. In hundreds of concentration camps sponsored by something called the Office of State Security, thousands of Germans, male and female, old and young, high and low, Nazi and non-Nazi, were rounded up and imprisoned. Staffed and run by Jews with help from the Poles, Czechs, Russians, and other former concentration camp inmates, the prisons were little better than vast torture chambers where dying was a thing to be prolonged, not hastened. While those with blonde hair, blue eyes, and handsome features were first to go, anyone who spoke German would do. For these vengeful camp operators, no torture, no sadism, no depravity, no evil seemed too monstrous to inflict on those now in their power. Some Germans were forced to crawl naked on all fours and eat their own excrement as well as that of others. Many were drowned in open latrines. Hundreds were herded into buildings and burned to death or sealed in caskets and buried alive. Near Lambsdorff, German women were forced to disinter bodies from a Polish burial site, then kiss and make love to the putrid, rotting corpses. Not surprisingly, the mortality rate at the concentration camps was staggering, and of those rare individuals who did leave with their lives, few could any longer be called human. Meanwhile, as the judicial charade was in progress behind prison walls, tortures of another kind stalked the liberated German people, as the Allied victors enacted their plan to divide, loot, and utterly destroy conquered Germany. In late 1944, the so-called Morgenthau Plan was endorsed by President Roosevelt, making the Jewish pre-war demand for German extermination official. Named for Roosevelt's Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau, but actually conceived by the Secretary's top aide, Harry Dexter White, both of whom were Jewish, the program called for the complete destruction of Germany after victory had been won. In addition to the dismantling and destruction of heavy industry and the permanent closure of mines, the Morgenthau Plan called for a reduction of the Reich's land area by 1/2. As many knew, this act guaranteed that roughly 2/3 of the German population, or 50 million people, would soon die of starvation. With the remnant of the population reduced to subsistence farming, and with the shrunken nation totally at the mercy of hostile European neighbors, it was estimated that within 2 generations Germany would cease to exist. When Roosevelt's successor, Harry Truman, met at Potsdam with Stalin and the new British Prime Minister Clement Attlee in July 1945, most of the teeth in Morgenthau's murderous scheme remained on the table. With the signature of the Big Three, the plan went into effect. Stalin's methodical looting in the Russian occupation zone became prodigious. Steel mills, grain mills, lumber mills, sugar and oil refineries, chemical plants, optical works, shoe factories, and other heavy industries were taken apart down to the last nut and bolt and sent east to the Soviet Union, where they were reassembled. Those factories allowed to remain in Germany were to operate solely for the benefit of Russia. Electric and steam locomotives, their rolling stock, and even the tracks they ran on were likewise sent east. Unlike its primitive Soviet ally, the United States had no need for German plants and factories. Nevertheless, the Americans were far and away the most zealous at destroying Germany's ability to recover. While the U.S. may have spurned German industry, they had a great interest in the Reich's hoard of treasure. Billions of dollars in gold, silver, and currency, as well as priceless paintings, sculptures, and other artworks, were plucked from their hiding places in caves, tunnels, and salt mines, and shipped across the Atlantic. Additionally, and of far greater damage to Germany's future, was the mental dismantling of the Reich. Tons of secret documents revealing Germany's tremendous organizational talent in business and industry were simply stolen. Hundreds of the greatest scientists in the world were likewise compelled to immigrate by the victors. One man opposed to the vengeance-minded program was George Patton.
Evidently, the virus started by Morgenthau with a Semitic revenge against all Germans is still working. I can't see how Americans can sink so low.
During the first post-war years, Germany was little better than a vast concentration camp. Coinciding with the ruthless Allied program of denazification and re-education was the American and British policy of non-fraternization, segregating the victors from the vanquished in an effort to further degrade and demonize Germans and crush what little pride and respect remained. One year after the war's end, the former Reich still had urban dwellers clinging precariously to their caves and cracks for shelter. In Berlin alone, an estimated 50,000 orphans struggled to survive.
Some of them, one-eyed or one-legged veterans of 7 or so, many so deranged by the bombing and the Russian attack that they screamed at the sight of any uniform, even the Salvation Army one.
While occupation troops dined on 5-course meals complete with fried sole, Dutch steak, and ice cream, thousands of starving children felt fortunate if a potato peel or crust of moldy bread was unearthed. Children who could not live by their wits died. Those who didn't starve or freeze were crushed by the walls of their caves or torn to shreds by unexploded bombs which lay scattered across Germany by the ton. On their own, orphans aged fast, and little girls aged fastest of all. Like their older sisters, the children soon discovered that selling themselves could stave off starvation. A dreaded concern, not only for those who were selling themselves, but for the millions of rape victims, was unwanted pregnancy. Thousands who were in fact pregnant sought and found abortions. Thousands more lived in dreadful suspense, their lives utterly shattered in every way imaginable. At length, Allied soldiers, reporters, and others began to recoil at the ruthless reign of terror transpiring in Germany.
While the Germans around them starve, wear rags, and live in hovels, the American aristocrats live in often unaccustomed ease and luxury. They live in the finest houses from which they drove the Germans. They swagger about in fine liveries and gorge themselves on diets 3 times as great as they allow the Germans. When we tell the Germans their low rations are necessary because food is so short, they naturally either think we are lying to them or regard us as inhuman for taking the lion's share of the short supplies while they and their children starve.
Would I, can everybody still hear me? What I wanted to point out at this point, was how in the number of dead, I believe it says that there were more Germans that died in the 2 years after the war than the entire 6 years during the war. And that really should give you enough common sense proof that this was nothing but a genocide against the German people. You know, and go ahead, Mike.
Well, yeah, a deliberate genocide. This was no accident.
Right.
That even though the occupiers may have 100 different excuses for this, this was engineered. It was contrived. It was orchestrated.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, it went on. Well, let's put it this way: I have no dates when it actually stopped. Of course, it's arbitrary. But I can say this, that Germany is still going through it. The Morgenthau Plan, to my knowledge, has never, ever been rescinded. It's still in place. And I think the genocide that's going on right now, and it is a genocide, when you're being replaced by another species of humans who are coming into your nation and raping your women, breeding with your women.
Just a moment, being brought in.
Yes.
They're not really coming in, they're being brought in. You have to remember when an immigrant, or when some non-European wants to get into Europe, the surest way to get there is to go to Israel, where they deport you to a North African coastal city and give you $3,000 cash, which is what the Jews calculated to be the cost of paying a smuggler. Plus, all of the European governments are being forced to pay tribute to Jewish organizations like Israel Aid and other Jewish NGOs that are being used to transport these replacement populations across the Atlantic. I think phrasing is very important here.
Well, and the Caligari plan is definitely in motion, and Barbara Specter, her NGO in Sweden, is directly involved with Rothschild, and it is sad and angry. It makes me angry,
It's genocide by replacement. That's exactly what it is. It is a continuation of World War II.
Right.
There is no cutoff point. It's continuing, and it will continue until, Patrick made some really good comments about the Germans today, the Germans that we see, the Germans. He's right about everything. I can agree with him totally. The fact that the German housewife will go out and sweep the sidewalk in front of her home. I mean, we're talking about some of the greatest people on earth. Not just the cleanest, but the most generous.
Right, and after all their suffering, they're still like that.
Yes, and and I guess the end run ambition is to make sure there's not one German left on earth, because why would Germany be taking in all these have-nots, these darks from all other nations, Africa, Middle East?
I'll tell you why. Because the Jew wrote the book, which was given praise in the New York Times, titled "Germany Must Perish." That's why. This isn't the first people that the Jews have wiped out.
And may I add the comments when they did publish that? We have who there was a few well-known papers. The Time magazine said it was a splendid idea, and the Washington Post posted that it was a provocative theory. Yeah.
Well, when you control the range of communication, as they did back then, all of them, you can say virtually anything you want. Yeah, it's a wonderful idea. Yeah, and it's sickening to us today. We owe Germany. We did this to Germany. I'm talking about the Allies. Yes,
absolutely.
Of course, Jewish orchestrated. Of course it is. We all know that. But we willingly went and did that. We didn't go to Canada or hide in the woods to keep from doing it. No, our fathers believed that propaganda, swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, went off and did terrible things.
And the Royal Air Force, I don't know.
I'm going to have to disagree on that point. Brainwashed population, children raised in a cult don't know any better until they're out of that cult.
I'm sorry, Patrick, but even the pilots had stated they would look down, and they knew goddamn well there were I don't care.
Everyone who spoke out against it in prison. So those who could have woken the other people up.
The bottom line is those pilots saw that they were all civilians, and they did it anyway.
And there were some pilots that refused to go along with it.
And they all should have. And they all should have. It was a war crime. That's a war crime.
Don't you both agree? Don't all three of you agree that we did this to Germany?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Okay. Now, shouldn't it fall to us right now to do what we can to make up for that?
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
As simple as you can. Let's start first with an apology.
What do you say we confiscate all these Jew bankers' wealth and give it to the Germans as reparations? How's that?
That'd be a very good start. That would be a very good start. But yes, of course the Germans have no. Yes, of course they're the way they are today because we made them that way. This unhealthy, unspiritual, unquestioning type of people. That's what we did to them. Now we need to reverse all that. We need to,
Right.
I have no problem at all fighting for Germany.
I was and I was having a real problem with all this new stuff I was learning, and every day I'd be like, oh, there was another letdown, and then I read your book, and I said, you know what, I found new resolve through here. As devastating as their stories were, these poor people, I keep thinking about them, and I said, you know what, at a minimum, the least I could do is keep going with this channel. And it makes me feel better just getting it off my chest and telling people what the truth is. And that's the bottom line. The lies have to stop.
I'd love to see, in my lifetime, the leader of every modern nation who was an allied nation back then apologizing to Germany.
Absolutely.
Apologizing to the people
Absolutely.
for what we did to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would love to see monuments raised. So
That's
that we
right.
never did it again, ever, to a people.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's probably a little more realistic, Patrick, than what your recommendation was.
What are you talking about? Hitler imprisoned the Rothschilds and ransomed them for a fortune. Now, if we support all of the governments that wish to liberate themselves from international tyranny, and we make sure that these rats, these termites, can't leave the buildings they've been trying to tear down with all of the resources they've snatched, that's a start, and I think that's very possible, and I think it's the only way to stop them from going someplace else and reconsolidating their assault on the survival of the free peoples of the earth.
Well, I think you both are correct. It's just a matter of where you're at in the timeline, basically. So
I'm thinking of preventing this. When I say never again, I'm not talking about some hoax. I'm talking about never again letting the Jews brainwash our vulnerable citizens into becoming pawns in their terrible wars of atrocity.
Right. And that's why we're here right now. And that's why, with my programs at least, when I come across propaganda, if I'm reading an article, for example, I'll point it out. And I'm actually going to do another show where I talk about what propaganda is, how they manipulate, and how does a psychopath think, things like that, because it is very applicable to today's day and time and back then. And we also have to educate, and then hopefully, it sticks and people, it all starts with you, with every one of you. And if you want to do it, get up and do it. Show by example. And, but I think that both of you are correct. It's just a matter of, can it be done tomorrow, or is that going to be a year from now? You know what I mean?
Let's elaborate a little bit here. So when someone's burning down houses, do you spend all of your time and energy trying to put out the latest fire that took them 5 minutes to light, or do you spend your time stopping the arsonist? And what I'm saying here is, if we just go down on our knees and apologize for having been janissaries for these international bankers, these Jewish speculators and people that control the propaganda, at that point, how are we going to win over people in this country?
It has to be both. You have to do both. You have to do both.
If you look at the way that the Russians have been achieving a slow march back towards traditionalism, and even though there are still some Jews high up in Russia that need to be removed from power, that are loyal to Israel, I think it's highly important to realize that counter-signaling people that were involved in wars where they thought they were laying down their lives for the highest virtue of their country and spitting on them, even if it was the truth to say they were slaves of the Jews, they didn't know it. And none of the population.
I'm going to stop you right there, because acknowledgement of the fact that they were wrong or we were wrong is not spitting on anybody. That's the truth. Bottom line, and we start there. We can start there in a multi-pronged approach, with your ideas as well. But all of it has to be acknowledged, not just one.
I understand psychology too well to blame the people who fought in uniform in World War II for any nation. They were all victims of propaganda, except for the Germans. The Germans were the only ones that did not focus on propaganda.
I agree.
They assumed that the truth of the matter would come out in the Allied nations. And the truth didn't get to them because they had no way of receiving it, because the Jews completely controlled the wire services, the newspapers. Henry Ford tried to get the word out like a good intelligentsia. And the Jews shut him down, threatened to shut down the shipments of steel and oil and electricity to his factories. Charles Lindbergh, Father Coughlin,
The acknowledgement still needs to come. All right, I get that, but being a victim,
there were millions of Americans
wait.
that were in the boom.
Being the victim only goes so far. Yeah, there were victims of propaganda. That's where it ends. Period.
And once you understand psychology,
I understand
that victim status is the ultimate trump card in the mind of the public.
I don't care.
I'm talking about
I don't care.
It doesn't matter whether or not we care. How do the Jews portray themselves?
As victims.
There's a reason. There's a reason
now,
for
victims
that.
of propaganda, we get that, we accept it, we move on. And the point is that the Allies were the bad guys, and we need to do an education program,
the Allies
if you will.
were the victims too. The Allies got slaughtered fighting for the Jews too. The Russians were also victims of the Jews.
I understand that, but we're talking about the German people and their perspective, and the German people were the true victims of Allied attacks, and those pilots that knew better. But you know what? I don't want to focus.
Who was it that planned their slaughter? We should focus on this because it was a plan of the Jews.
I agree with you.
Nation.
That's also it as well.
And they had complete control.
Right. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying to take any of the GIs and put them on war crime trials. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah, it's the people in the charge of the governments that should be put on war crime trials. Okay. That's what I'm saying. And we have to all acknowledge that the Germans were the victims, and you know, they were the victims. The Allies, you know, were the bad guys in that war. It was not a good war. It was the bad war, as like Michael King's book is. But anyway, let's move forward. Let's do Q&A, you guys. I know some of you have been itching to ask Mike some questions. You know, and Patrick, real quick, I agree with you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying everybody's correct. You know?
What I'm saying is perception is reality. Have you read Hitler's books? He nailed this a million times over and over and over and over again. So did Rockwell. Anyone who had any luck in motivating the people, anyone who was able to truly project a motive power, understood psychology. Yeah. And I understand objectively your statements can be seen that way, but ultimately...
Well, no, factually, there's factual and perception as well.
If you're told it doesn't matter, 90% of any country, the facts don't matter. They go with the propaganda. It has always been this case.
And that's what we have to fight, though. Here's what you're missing. You have to fight and teach people. You have to fight the propaganda and teach people. And education.
Do I go out and share every fact and every bit of truth that I know? And there's
that's part of it, though. That's how you win.
It is part of it. But if I went out and gave every fact I knew about 9/11, as opposed to just giving the most emotionally powerful pieces that are full of rich imagery, and the ones that are most easily verifiable, because the general public is lazy. You must study propaganda.
I know.
Hitler would not have risen up and stopped the Bolshevik takeover of Germany unless he understood group psychology, which is
I get that.
I'm imploring you, and I'm almost begging you to please take into consideration that most people will only be passively informed. They want propaganda only. This is critical.
And you could put facts in a propaganda program, and that's how you fight their bad propaganda. You get what I'm saying? It's a both. I agree with you. We have to do both.
I didn't go up and read a list of facts when I ran that won the hearts and minds of people that had me polling in second to Feinstein.
But you did speak. You spoke truth. You spoke truth.
But I took in mind group psychology when I decided
that's what I'm saying.
To use
exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you.
But what I'm saying is that phrase is absolute poison to say that the Allied soldiers were wrong. I can tell you, even if objectively you're right that the Jews had them convinced to do the right thing, they thought they were doing the right thing.
Yes, I know. And if they learned the facts, I agree with you. And if they knew the facts now, they would not look at that war the same. They wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't. They have veterans from England that have said they never would have thought the Germans that
exactly.
the Jews
That's what exactly right. That's
and
exactly what I'm saying.
All of the people that were spreading the truth were thrown in prison. And Sir Archibald Ramsey wrote about this in his book. They had a Patriot Act passed in 1932 or 33 in England, where the Jews that ran the government could throw you into prison without any due process or just cause. And the same thing happened here.
Right.
Murder Inc. was hired by the ADL, and a Jewish Supreme Court justice of the state of New York and other states got together to make sure the Jewish terrorists were allowed to wage terror on those people who dared to speak the truth, and they were squashed and thrown into internment camps. We interned millions of people in this country because they dared to speak out.
Right.
And when you deny the nature of power and group psychology and just say they were wrong because they believed the Jews, when I'm telling you, the people that were good enough to speak the truth were thrown into prison.
I'm not saying that you're misinterpreting what I'm trying to say here. You're misinterpreting that. I'm not saying that you can't have one or the. I'm saying you have to have both to have a successful campaign, if you will, or fight against all of this. And like we both agree, if those soldiers knew the truth, they wouldn't have done it.
You guys are bringing up subjects here that I'm listening to at all. But this is sort of in between, I think, what both of you are saying. You, I don't know if you're old enough, either one of you. Trav certainly isn't. But I remember growing up and hearing things like this, comments about Uncle Fred, who came back from Europe with his uniform and his rifle, put it in the closet. And people always wanted to hear stories from Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred wouldn't say squat. He would shut up. He wouldn't say anything. And they'd always say, well, Uncle Fred, he saw a lot. He just doesn't want to talk about it. I don't think it's so much what Uncle Fred saw, it's what Uncle Fred did. And I think there were thousands, maybe millions, who came back from the wars, both in Europe and Japan, who had not only seen but done some terrible things. And yes, they knew exactly what went on. And no, you could probably never fill their heads full of the same type of propaganda that would send them over doing that again. And I think, that's a terrible way to learn, but they did learn. Now, you could say, well, they went to Korea. Well, not this generation, I don't think. But anyway, I'm off on another subject. Right. Trav, are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I am.
Okay.
If I can just put it, I agree with what you said there, Tom. I don't know what everybody did. It seems like maybe Erica's approach could be a seminar in advanced Goy studies with advanced integrity. Mr. Little's is more probably for the masses and more I think Mr. Little has a good approach for the masses. That's definitely for sure. And these are sort of mutually exclusive positions, but they're at the same time they're both right. So it's a complicated thing.
Well, and they're related, and I think an education campaign needs to be is important. Knowledge is power. So anyway, let's get back to our audience, because we're going to end this stream. And do you guys have any burning questions for Mike?
Or for Patrick too, or Trav?
Right, anybody, but you're our star guest.
I wouldn't bet on that personally.
And there's a delay, so it may take a minute or two. I want to thank all of you, Mike, Trav, Patrick, for coming on the show. And it's healthy that we can have a debate and not agree, and still hold respect for each other, and that's fine.
I admire you too. I'm one who goes along to get along. I'm generally I seem unopinionated, I suppose, at times, but I admire people.
I was just trying to make very clear, going out there, if you look at the people that have successfully de-Judaized their societies, they did not blame the people who had been brainwashed during the decay of their society. And I think it's very important to look to Poland and Russia and the narratives forming there that are actually winning the people over, where there is a strong sense of knowing about the Jewish problem, and where at the same time they're anti-immigration and all this stuff, and for preserving their culture and pro-family and pro-tradition. And you have to look at the routes they took to winning over the people to be this way, how they beat the Jewish Hollywood propaganda. And the way to do it isn't to go straight for the clit, so to say. Pardon my French, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I may end up, Patrick, by the way, living on a boat myself this summer in Europe.
They're a lot of fun, and I highly recommend getting a sailboat because using the autopilot with the sails up makes it so you don't have the noise and cost of a motor going.
Yeah. I'll ask you a real simple question. How about the waves? Even docked, is it okay? In other words, I know when you got rough seas, it's probably a little more difficult, but will it put you to sleep or keep you awake or what?
Depends on how bad it is. And sailing is something I did when I first woke up after I read Culture of Critique. I had to go to my happy place. I had to go find, my calm blue ocean, that mantra hippies and stuff will repeat to themselves. And what I did was I took 2 weeks off and I just went sailing. And I go sailing every 2 or 3 days, and I have to because of the nature of my living situation is set up. It's like I'm a transitory boat. I'm like a bird going from one marsh to the next, and I have to go sailing every 2 or 3 days, regardless of what the weather is. And sometimes the most fun I have is when the seas are rough and I can feel the power of nature, and I have to trim the sails and make sure the hatches are battened down and make sure nothing's blowing off the boat. And when you get to where you're going, you either, kiss the anchor chain when you're putting it down or the dock when you get there some of these times. I was out in 60-mile-per-hour gusts 2 weeks ago in a storm that took out the power in a metropolitan area. The East Bay of San Francisco lost power, which, imagine New York losing power. We're close to that level of metropolitan area. And I was out in the middle of that storm, and when I got to the dock, the power was out at the dock, and the people said, "Holy shit, you were out sailing in this? Why'd you do that?" I said, "Well, it was the day I had to do it, and I had a lot of fun doing it."
I think I used to camp for 3 years as I did public lectures around the country, and for 3 years, a wife and I, we traveled in a 27-foot pull trailer. Yeah, I know what you mean by 3 days. I get that pretty quickly, but.
Mike, yeah. we have a couple things from the listeners. Glory to the King Jesus says, "Tell Thomas he's an American patriot, and thanks for the historical lessons." We have another question from VB. He wants to know what woke Mike up to the JP.
Well, I think unlike everyone else here tonight, I have it's a curiosity gene. Let's call it that. And from a very early age, I started paying attention to things around me. And as luck would have it, I eventually found out about Dr. William Pierce and that exquisite magazine he used to put out every couple of weeks, months, whatever. And I started reading that, and seriously reading that, and it all made sense. I could see it around me. And it's things like this, I suppose, too, that came along. I learned to identify a Jew on sight, or verbally. I still have that ability, of course. They cannot show up, or they cannot open their mouth, or they cannot say a certain thing that I don't instantly recognize them as if they were wearing a uniform. It's that simple. And when I saw what was going on, what was happening to us, then it became, it became easy to see who was doing what to whom.
Right.
And it's still that way today. Only one thing I grew up with, and it was a wrong notion. I grew up with this idea. Of course, they perpetuate the myth that they're extremely bright, extremely intelligent, omniscient, prescient. There are all these things that a genius is. I believe that myself until I started realizing all the mistakes they make, too. For instance, let me give you some examples of some of the mistakes they're making right now. Almost shooting for sport every weekend, gazing kids out throwing rocks and flying kites. Or the orchestration. They build this huge wall, which I understand. I get it. They build this huge wall to keep their nation intact, keep the integrity perfect, and yet they allow, and they, to the nth degree, to open up the rest of the world, especially the white world, to this invasion. That's stupid stuff. It's stuff that anybody can see and put two and two together and say, hey, yeah, that's my enemy. devil in my eye. They want me dead. It's easy to see stuff like this. And
well, they openly write about it now. The psychopathic level of audacity, the chutzpah. Just look at the blue check marks on Twitter. Since they're preaching for the death of all white men, I call them the checka marks, as in the. Yes. And when I get into arguments with them and win, I call it overloading the GPU, which is a computer pun. It also stands for GPU, as in the secret police in Russia.
Oh gosh, Patrick, we have a question for you. Sublime Braid wants to know, ask Patrick what he thinks it will take to win the battle against the enemy.
Winning hearts and minds, which is purely emotional, has nothing to do with logic or fact with 95% of people.
Okay.
Wow.
VB, this is a question for Mike from VB. Does Mike think the Talmudic ticks can be ousted through political means only? What percent of the population does he think we need to have to make an impact?
I don't think the political aspect's going to do it for us. I think it's going to be something we're striving now for critical mass across this entire country. I'm talking about the U.S. now. Critical mass, it's an understanding and awareness. And let's put it this way. I don't know how to put an analogy. Patrick could probably do it quickly. But if I'm feeling like I'm losing a battle here, and I've got heavy investments, but I can transfer those investments somewhere else and perhaps have an airplane ticket to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, whatever, available. There may come a day when I say, it's getting close, too close, I'm going to use that ticket and get the hell out of here. No, I don't see... Trump was good in a way and not so hot in the other ways. I see this whole mess continuing, but I think the simple fact of us four here talking about this tonight, and this is going on by the thousands everywhere in America and Europe right now, what we're doing right now, this is it's a rising. It's a mass heading for critical mass. We can all sense it and feel it. We know we're getting closer and closer, and believe it, our friends also know that too. I'm being joking there.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question? I think it will come, but it won't come the way a lot of people think. I don't think it's going to come through violence either. I think it's simply people realizing, well, that was that. We tried that here. Let's go somewhere else and try this. That's what I think it's going to end up as. Did that answer my question? Go ahead, Pat.
I would say, look at South Africa. Things keep on getting worse and worse there, and they aren't waking up. And I think ultimately, if you read Hitler and Rockwell again, you'll understand the masses are not logical. The Founding Fathers knew this, Hitler knew this, Aristotle knew this, and I think ultimately it's great to have faith in your fellow man, your fellow white man, your fellow everyman. But what I'm saying is that most people, there's a reason why societies form into an intelligentsia, and there's a reason why aristocracies form and stuff. It's because most people don't want to think, they want to be thought for. And when you have the Jews doing the thinking for you, you can't win. So this, I think, is going to be a battle where we win the hearts and minds and continue to leverage those forces that are good at propaganda, at delegitimizing the Jewish media, ways of putting out emotionally power ways of exposing the hypocrisy of these Jews, and get people to put on the sunglasses. And I'm kind of a tank myself, where I go hard with the facts and the logic too, but on the spectrum, you guys are even further to that side than I am. But there are guys that are way left of me that are doing everything they can to lead the horse to water in terms of putting on the sunglasses. And I think an army doesn't win with all tanks. An army doesn't win with all airplanes. An army doesn't win with all infantry or with all auxiliary artillery and stuff. An army wins with combined arms, and there are different personality types that are susceptible to different types of, let's just say instruments of truth. And so I think ultimately,
I agree with you.
The knowledge that you guys share here is absolutely critical. Where did I go to when I wanted to learn the truth about what the Jew-led forces had done against European liberation forces during World War II? And I went to Goodrich. I went to the people who did the Hellstorm movie that you played. I forget their name. And that a lot of them don't have a public-facing thing. So a lot of things that are for the people who really are pursuing the truth and need to know true history and all that, that's great and brutal, brute force facts with that, and that'll work with about 5 or 10% of the population. But I'm ultimately saying that you have to look at what the Jews are doing. They're in the position of power, and it's obvious to see what they're doing, and they must be doing it for a reason.
We have another question for Mike. Judo wants to know what your opinion is on Trump.
Number one, I'm glad he's there. I do feel a sense of, I feel like he slowed the madness down for a while to allow us to regenerate, regroup, whatever we needed to do, and we're doing it right now, let's face it. That's the reason I'm hopeful for Patrick in the coming year, 18 months. But still, okay, maybe I can answer that better by saying, I'm glad he's there. It's better than the alternative. Imagine that. I don't want a war with Russia. I think that's one of the first things she would have got us into, is a war with Russia, personally, from her ignorance and her... but Trump, Patrick Little would be 10 times the president of Trump. He would beat him. I mean, he would be the man I want in there. Somebody with sense. Somebody who understands history. Someone who understands modern politics, international politics. Trump, I don't know what to say, but I have people who tell me, stay with him, stay with him. He's still getting some things done. I don't see any wall, by the way. And I've heard that he could, overnight, start the construction of that damn thing and finish it pretty quickly, too. But I like him. I voted for him. I actually worked for him because, the alternative didn't look so hot. But, gee, I thought we would get a lot more than this. But, and all that man has to do is build that damn wall. He's got his core supporters back again. But if he doesn't, that's it. No more. And, no, I'm voting for Patrick Little, 2020. And I don't know who his vice president would be, but...
maybe it'll be Trev.
Trev, yeah, there you go. Yeah, we need some kick-ass people. That's what we need right now.
Pravada wants to know, Mike, have you ever read Siege?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Anybody here have?
No, I haven't.
I've heard about it.
Patrick, aren't you an avid reader? Have you read that?
That's one of the ones that I've read in my library. So many people kept on saying to read it, and I did. And I read the way Hitler instructs people to read in chapters 1 through 3 of his book in Mein Kampf. Can anyone tell me, not just the facts from the book, what was the concept of how to properly read according to Hitler?
I cannot help.
I haven't read it yet. I have it, but I have not read it yet.
Okay, well, it's a book that's an instruction manual on group psychology and how to beat the Jews at their own game. So he said the proper way to read is to integrate new knowledge and test it against what you already know, check its validity, and see if it changes your Weltanschauung, or your world perspective. If it changes your world perspective and it's effective, incorporate it into your tactics and your thinking. Basically, he says you should be like a gold sieve. And what I got from the book that you're asking about was an understanding of how Jews subvert. And it's the black-pilling part of the book, but it's also important to know how Jews infiltrate. He talked about how Jews will send people in, like you're talking about Jewish power and easily provable facts, and all they want to talk about is some tiny thing that maybe 1/1000th of the population is diehard for, and just fill in the blank. You're going to meet all those different people, some of which are just a little bit autistic, that say, you have to cover this point or I won't support you. And it's something where if you said it, you're already saying the JQ, which is already like, I think of people, I used the clitoris metaphor before, but let's do a more... No,
I want to hear this. What's the clitoris metaphor?
When you're trying, so winning over someone, ultimately, with when you're winning
hit the
over,
home run, boom.
You win the heart first. You get her to want you,
right?
And that you don't just reach straight for the clitoris,
right?
And And let me use another metaphor here. The other metaphor is like a tachometer. So let's say that people have a tinfoil tachometer. You know what tinfoil is, like when people say that UFOs took down the towers or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Your conspiracy theories or whatever, if that's what
So they've been programmed to detect certain things as conspiracy theories through Pavlovian conditioning.
Right.
So when you say Jews run Hollywood, let's say you redline at 6,000 RPMs. That's as many repetitions per minute as your motor can do. When you say Jews run Hollywood and Jews run the banks, well, that's stuff they've heard before.
Right.
You've already got them at like 3,500 RPMs. And if you say something like, I understand there are concerns about vaccines and stuff, and I'm not saying one way or the other, and I'm also not going to take a public stance on this. Although I think most likely the guys that are critical, if the Jews have any type of medicine, they're probably going to try and do bad things with it, just like with pain management. Anyhow, if you were to get on a debate stage and start talking about vaccines, you would get the support, diehard support to their death of 1/1000th of the country. But you would put the other 95% of the country over the red line with the tinfoil tachometer.
And would that attract them or repel them?
It blows their motor. They shut you out.
So they would go run away from you. Is what you're saying? Okay. Next question.
And once again, I didn't take a stance on that issue. That's just an example.
It's an example. Right.
Yeah.
I get it. And you make sense. Carmichael 31 or 3L asked Patrick why he thinks funding space programs is important.
Well, first off, let's say a nation has things like building roads and maintaining the integrity of its borders and defending itself and taking care of its nation, its people from which it consists. It's full. Those are very high priorities, right? That's like a man going out and earning the food his children need to eat, right? Very high on the priority list, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, you want your child to do as great as possible. So if you have 8 hours in the day and you have to spend 7 of them working to provide for your family, are you going to spend that last hour going out and shopping to buy the food you need, or are you going to spend it trying to teach your kid extra physics lessons after school? So let's compare that to like a space program. Ultimately, that could really be of long-term benefit. And when the Germans ran their own country, they were already starting to think of this. Werner von Braun, for example, Hitler wanted to expand to other planets because he knew the sun would actually burn out. He actually talked about that several times. He was very much interested in the long-term survival of his people. Well, you don't go building some massive science project for your kid when you're going bankrupt and you don't have the time for it. Ultimately, it could bring great things. It's a high-risk thing. Would have an infinite payoff in the long run in terms of the long-run survivability of our people. And before I knew about the Jews, it was one of my top interests, was how to ensure our survival. I've always thought like this, by the way, beyond the useful life of our son. Now, the Jews are burning down my house, so I'm not going to focus on building a specialized tool shed right now in the backyard. So space programs and stuff like that don't matter until the Jews are removed from power in every single host nation they currently could wage war on us from, should we take power here again.
Okay. Blue Velvet wants to know, what would Patrick do if you were in New York to rally support in Wall Street area?
The Jews run Wall Street. I mean, you saw the memo they put out for the candidates they didn't want supported. You lose your job at Goldman Sachs if you vote for X candidate. Wall Street's the last place I would go.
So you wouldn't go there at all to try to get support for yourself, for your campaign or whatever? I think that's what she's asking.
I would only want support from an industrialist like Henry Ford. Elon Musk would be a dream, just because he has a factory and he produces. He can't have the Jews just cut off, his stream of wholesale goods or stuff, or cut off his 30 days payable credit or something like that in terms of receivables and accounts payable. The only people I would go after in terms of looking for support would be super independently wealthy people, which is exactly the type of Americans' wealth that the Jews have tried to destroy. This is very clearly laid out in Henry Ford's The International Jew about halfway through the book. I think it's in the same chapter as he mentions the Jews trying to destroy farmers for being too independent of their financial system.
Right. Okay. Let's see. What do we have next? This is just a comment to Mike. Glory to the King Jesus. It says, ask Mike to look into the Anti-Semitism Act of 2017 that Trump had passed. Let's see. What else do we have? If you want to ask a question, please tag my name because it's in orange and it's easy for me to find. Glory to the King Jesus wants to know, ask Mike about the Combating European Anti-Semitism Act signed into law by Trump January 14th, 2019. Did you know anything about that, Mike?
I think he might have said he stepped away for 5 minutes.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right. So, Trev, what's your opinion on like as we kind of wrap up here? What's kind of your take on how where we're all at, I guess?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I'm sort of over everything. I don't have much faith in the system. I'm sort of. I have to expect a civil war. I'm not sure when, or balkanization, or how things are going cannot go on forever. The debt problems are just going to get worse and worse. I live in a place that's full of minorities and migrants, and it's horrible. And my family from the Midwest has no idea what's going on. This type of degeneracy is slowly creeping into, the Midwest. As an example, and I'll try not to go on. I'll go on for like a minute.
Mm-hmm.
As an example,
I mean, just answer. Don't rush yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might be going off on 10. My niece and nephew are in a school, and they had donuts with dads and some other thing with moms, and they're in a Catholic private school, and already that is unacceptable because some woman got divorced, and therefore nobody can have a mother. So I just this cultural Marxism, or this destruction of all standards, is slowly seeping through the whole society. There's nothing more left to strive for. It's just everybody's equal at the bottom. So I support Mr. Little, and I try to support what's going on, but I'm not too hopeful in terms of the status quo, to be honest.
Well, I think what I've heard a lot of tonight, and this is for people that are hardcore, I agree. This is also how I was when I first woke up before I tried to enter politics. And by the way, I hate politics more than anything else on this fucking earth. I wish everything was just telling the truth. I fucking hate politics. I fucking hate politicians. Sorry.
I agree with you 100% on that, man.
And I'm not just saying that I don't like politicians, but I'm running. No, it literally is not being able to just come out and tell everyone everything you know. It's literally having to figure out what people will identify with and respond to. And propaganda ultimately is leading people to the truth. So I go with things that are emotive, but that are emotionally powerful, because that's how the Jews work. Study who's in control, how do they maintain that control. This is how Hitler beat back the Bolshevik Revolution in the 1920s. This is how it is done. They're still using the same Frankfurt School type stuff, the same Zionist protocols. Nothing has changed. It's all emotions. 90% of people are just purely emotional beings, and there's nothing we can do about that. And you have to know what you can control, and that's not something you can control. But as to what the solution is, I'm not sure. You have to remember, this isn't like some game you played with a kid when you were a kid where you could save it at level 1 and then build out your civilization or whatever you're building a different way and then say, okay, there's a more optimal way to do that. You can't look at every single stage of everything and then pick it apart I guarantee probably at least 5 to 20% of your chat will always be Jews. You can't please everyone.
Right.
And
right.
so what the Jews will do, the infiltrators, the provocateurs, and this is something that Mason did cover well. There's a lot of that book I strongly disagree with, especially the shit to do with Manson. But he understood how the Jews subvert movements more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. He understood this very fucking well.
Can you send me after the show? Tell me. Just shoot me an email, and so I could put that in the chat. So if people are interested, and like I'm interested. I want to read it. But for other people to have access to that, and I'll put that in the description after the show.
That is low on the reading list.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever your recommendation is.
Hitler's Revolution is a lot more critical, and also Mein Kampf. If you haven't read Mein Kampf, I mean, stop, do that.
Okay.
It's critical because it goes over psychology,
right.
And while we all admit that Hitler tried to liberate Europe and try to fight off the Bolsheviks, which is his own stated goal, and if you look at all his actions, that's all he was ever trying to do was to keep Bolshevism out.
Right.
You'll understand that the end product of what he achieved, the 10 years of prosperity where he quadrupled the German standard of living, where he made families happy again, where he enabled societies and communities to clean themselves up and start to help each other and be social towards each other and fight off this Jewish porn and trannies and mother-daughter prostitution pairs in Berlin. All of this he achieved at the end, and you can't just look at the end product and say you have to be selling me that all right now. In terms of fighting back Jewish,
right? It's a multi-pronged approach, and it's a plan.
Yeah.
It's a plan.
And also read George Lincoln Rockwell. He was also a master of psychology, not quite to the extent that Adolf was, but you have to understand when good people understand psychology and they're able to write well, that is pure gold, and you have to read it.
Right.
So what I'm saying is you can't be. And this is a lot of people that are hardcore into facts and stuff. They want a hardcore game plan where you lay out everything you want to do publicly, when everything I'm doing right now is A/B testing, trying a bunch of different things, throwing a bunch of different darts at the board, and then whatever dart sticks best, trying to mass produce that, and then figure out what my next move is. This is literally a fog of war. The Jews are at war with all free peoples, trying to exterminate whites. If you've ever learned anything, if you've ever read anything from a military officer that's been in a battle, it's a fog of war. The first thing you do when you enter a battle is rip up your fucking plans, because the moment one thing goes other than the way you fantasized about, the whole plan goes to shit unless it's all just based on contingencies. And we're in a fog of war where the information is uncertainty. Like, you'll be trying to talk about 9/11, and suddenly a bunch of Jew shills come in talking about UFOs and holograms and shit. And then they'll gaslight 10% of the people that are in that particular movement, the truth movement in this case, into caring about nothing like that and attacking anyone who won't use those talking points. And this is critical. You can't just say, here is a perfect blueprint for how I'm going to defeat this international tyranny.
And it'll change.
It's a fog of war.
And it'll change, too. Absolutely. It'll change over time.
It's like a wrestling match. Ultimately, how we make Shlomo do a submission, we'll figure that out. Right now, we are just at the initial stages of the starring match, because we weren't even defending ourselves in sufficient numbers in terms of propaganda and stuff until very recently.
Amen, so brother. That's right. That's true. Yep.
What I really recommend is going back, and those people that you saw as highly effective, don't watch just the dreamy videos about them and all that. That's great. That's great for white pills and stuff, But go back and read their thoughts, their metaphysics, their well, now I'm getting off into philosophy.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of people have approached me saying, "Hey, dude, I saw this 1 hour video, and now I'm an expert on this or that."
Yeah, and right. It's just
Yeah, and I'm just saying, be holistic, and don't just get hyper obsessed on one thing that becomes your issue. The whole society. Hitler had to do a million things to defeat the Jewish subversion.
Yeah, and he won. He was successful at it too.
let's say that I'm at war with my neighbor and we're having a family feud and it's ongoing for like 2 weeks and I've got like 20 family members. If I become hyper obsessed with one hilltop out of 30 and don't focus on anything else, eventually I'll be flanked and surrounded and I'll lose even that hilltop. And that's the way it is, where if you say this is you have to bring up this issue which is going to set off the tinfoil tachometer for 90% of the population.
Right.
At that point, it's just like, thanks for your input, moving on.
Right. Spiritual Vapor.
Don't get into an argument with them.
Right. Spiritual Vapor wants to know, how did you get that pic with Mike Enoch? I don't know what he's talking about or referring to, but...
Oh, the one I posted on my LinkedIn. I went up to him and Dr. Duke. I was on security detail, and I was about to report in to be on the convoy protection detail where I had an AR. Luckily, I didn't have to discharge it. And they were there, and I walked up and gave Dr. Duke a $20 donation, and I asked if I could have a picture with them.
All they have to do is ask. The worst they could say is no, right?
Well, yeah, also, I just wanted to give Dr. Duke the $20, and also, I wanted to shake his hand. I had never met him before, and when I first woke up and I was at my most visceral in my rage, I tuned into his program, and he and his oration is what helped me realize that I wasn't the first goy to wake up and help me keep my wits about me.
Right.
And also, Mike Enoch, also, there was a... I did a phase for like a month right after I woke up where I was listening to a lot of podcasts, which, by the way, don't listen to many podcasts. Read more. I'd say spend 80% of your time reading books and newspaper articles, especially Jewish newspaper articles, like the one that, by the way, I just got blocked by Haaretz for retweeting them with my own comments too often. the Jew newspaper from Israel. And focus on that. Really... I lost my train of thought. I got about 3 hours of sleep last night. Sorry.
That's okay. VB wants to say, thank you, Mike. Your book has woken up so many people to the most important truth, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. It's good to hear those words. It never tires me to hear those words.
Right. Especially when you lose a lot in the process. It makes it feel like it's worth it.
I know.
There's a quick question for Patrick from Goldhorn 1000. Is DuckDuckGo safe as an alternative to Google?
I'm not certain if it's absolutely safe, but I do know that it is published that Google steals your information and sells it and pretty much tracks you whatever you do. I know that DuckDuckGo's statement is that they care about privacy, so just from what they say, the objectives of their company is, one is there to sell you as a product and your information as a product, which means anyone can buy it and anyone can take backdoors into accessing it. And the other one's stated purpose is privacy. So just from the face value, I'd say go with DuckDuckGo. I mean, other than that, you'd have to really get into the technical aspects of and start examining the scripts on the page and stuff to really look into it. So that's as deep as I'll go on that.
Okay. Timothy O'Hara wants to know, Patrick, just how guilty World War II Germany is. I want to know if the GDL should have the notion that World War II Germany really was the truly righteous one of the previous century.
They weren't the only righteous ones. They're just the biggest, most clear example. And my response to that is, if you want an answer, or I bet yourself, read Fedor's Hitler's Revolution, read Mein Kampf.
So you're not. So you're asserting that Germany was not guilty, correct? Of the accused crimes.
Well,
it was a two-part question.
Okay, well, yeah. So let's address those parts. So I addressed part of the question. I'll address the other part now, which is the Jews propagandized our soldiers, the American soldiers, and the Soviet soldiers, the Russian soldiers, saying that Germans were killing 6 million Jews in industrial killing machines, including automated masturbation machines, roller coasters that dumped them into ovens, and in the most inefficient type of use gas that the Germans have to press from coal to run motors to create exhaust to choke them out with type stuff. Like, obviously, this shit is a bunch of Jewish lies, and it is even the Jews have retracted 90% of what their atrocity propaganda is. I can even find quotes from rabbis that say that no more than 270,000 Jews died during World War II, let alone were killed in industrial killing machines in death camps. I mean, we can look at General Patton, Senator Kennedy. There were people that straight up said the Nuremberg trials are a load of shit. These German officers have had their testicles beaten with wrenches so badly that and with boots so badly that they'll never be able to have kids again. And they said this is a show trial. It's a bunch of Soviet Jews calling the shots on this thing. This is bullshit. And that is the entirety of the evidence against the German people. Testimonials from Jews and a bunch of tortured officers that were about to be hung that just wanted the pain to be over.
Right. And you know what? Tomorrow when Monica comes, she's going to explain to us how the justice system, if you want to call it justice, in Germany is today and back then, because I know they couldn't defend themselves, and if you do, you're punished for that as well. So make sure you guys all tune in for that, because it's all tied in. It's all related to each other. It's crazy.
And also that was my objective answer to it, because you guys are real objective. My public-facing answer would be is the Jews killed 30 to 50 million people in the Soviet Union using methods such as mobile gassing trucks, whereas the Jews that died in World War II in luxury internment camps with whorehouses, swimming pools, ice cream, and concerts
and
died
beer.
mostly of typhus because the Jews that ran the British Air Force, including the Jew Harris, made sure to bomb out all of the supply depots that were feeding the internment camps.
Amen. That's right. That's right. Next question. I did have... This is from Mr. Goodrich from Goldhorn 1000. Is there any place to purchase your books outside of Amazon?
Yes, Books A Million have them. BarnesandNoble.com have them. Also, I have them. ThomasGoodrich.com. I think it's actually cheaper than Amazon.
And that's your personal website, correct?
Yes,
yeah.
ThomasGoodrich.com. Okay. And thanks for asking. But yeah, that's it pretty much. Or borrow it from a friend if you know someone who's got the book. Borrow it. The last thing I want to hear is people buying the book, then putting it up on the shelf, and that's that. Of course, I'd rather them get off their butts and go out and do something and get involved in this movement that we need them so badly. But I'd like to hear that they passed it on to the next person, the next person, next person.
I've already passed on my copy of Hellstorm. However, I think that I left that out, and I just took it as a given because I was on with you. Of course, you can also say Holocaust means death by fire, and that's actually what the Jews did through their control of the Allied Air Forces to German women and children in cities that were non-military targets, and then explain the Christmas tree bombings, so to say, with the alternations between the high yield bombs and then the incendiary bombs. Of course, you can always just point to the fact that the stuff that the Jews accuse the Germans of doing is what the Jews actually did to Russians, such as the mobile gas and trucks and stuff along the White Sea Canal. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I just wanted to make a quick. What shocked me when I read Hellstorm was when I found out that FDR would do anything, kissing Stalin's ass, and Stalin was such a psychopathic murderer, killing over time 66 million of his own people, and I wanted to know. Mike, I was just wanting to know, what do you think? Why was FDR so? Why was FDR always trying to please Stalin all the time?
I really do think he was a communist, if not in fact in heart, if not in public, in his heart he was.
There's a lot more. If you look into this, actually. Why did George W. Bush do what he did with Iraq? Why did Clinton do what he did with bombing Iraq? Why did Wilson do World War I, it's ultimately because of who really had the power. Roosevelt didn't have any real power.
Right, I know, but he went out of his
bankers
right.
wanted.
But
Morgenthau was
right. But he went out of his way, and I mean, he was like so like kissing ass and calling him Uncle Joe, and it was just like he was way over the top.
That's because the Jews told him to. The presidents, for the most part, since the last 100 years, have not read any of their own words.
Yeah, FDR was a groveling dog when it came to Stalin. There was no, he couldn't go low enough to appease Stalin and please him. He's disgraceful. He's one of the worst mass murderers in history.
Yeah,
and he's just a despicable individual. And it's a model lesson for us to never have, as terrible as the presidents have been recently. None of them have even come close to approaching FDR, in my opinion. But no, I sicken every time I see that guy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, let's put it this way. Here's a cripple, Roosevelt. Stalin's called the strong man. He's probably closer to a dwarf. He's like 5'4" or something like that. But still, Roosevelt, supposedly leader of the world's strongest nation at that time, the U.S., and yet still going through these groveling acts. Stalin wants Dresden immolated. Well, guess what? Churchill and Roosevelt are happy to obey. There's nothing I can't say enough bad about FDR, quite honestly. And the crowd he surrounded himself, his so-called Jewish advisors that are, But hey, there's something I want to say here. It's off the subject a little bit, but I just want to say, you guys are all younger than me, quite a bit younger, actually, most of you, and I've been around since the late 60s, early 70s, following and then actually involved in the movement. So maybe I've got a better perspective on this. I noticed that younger people tend to be very impatient about what's going on right now. And in a good sense, that's great because, I'm like you. Let's move this thing along. But to an old dude like me who's seen it from the late 60s all the way through 70s, 80s, 90s, it looks like we are winning now with the speed of light, quite honestly. Most people don't have telescopic vision. I don't either. But maybe as an older person, and has been as long as I've been at this, maybe I can see a little better than you guys. We are winning with incredible speed and velocity. We're getting not just numbers. We're getting lots of people, but we're more than that. We're getting the best and the brightest of our people. I can attest to that. I talk to them. I know what I'm talking about. And we're talking to one, at least right now tonight, Patrick Little, in my opinion. And it's almost breathtaking how quickly we're turning this train wreck around. It probably doesn't seem like that to you guys who have, I don't hesitate to say you've come lately to this thing, but you're not as old as I am. I wake up every morning excited, terribly excited. And yet I do read some of the things that are being said, and people are just impatient as hell. But we're winning. And the good news is, okay, it's like the American Revolution. What was it? Something like 13% participated in the fight for freedom, then the fight against the British. 13%, and of that 13%, only 6% were actively involved. And of that group, only 3% were actually fighting. We've already got those numbers right now. I'm telling you, 13%, yep, that's just about exactly what we've got. That may be all we ever get, too, because let's face it, that means that there's something like 83% of the people don't do anything. Well, yeah, I'm not so sure we need massive numbers. Like I said, this critical mass thing is coming. And when we've got the best and the brightest, and I'm talking about not just strongest, I'm talking about the most thoughtful, the most reflective, the greatest intellects, the ones who can pull this thing together with their innovation, with their creativity, and they're doing it all the time. I'm surprised at some of the things our people are coming up with. In other words, guys, I want to more or less leave you on that note saying that we're winning. It's faster than you could ever imagine, trust me.
And I wonder if we're really going to start seeing the ball really kick and, get in gear here when Israel does leave us in the dust and we're destitute, and then finally, my hope is that out of that bad situation, that the rest of the goy will wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Finally,
I think it's important to note to exhaust the natural resources of this country would take hundreds and hundreds of years. So even if shit goes to shit, this country has mineral wealth and natural wealth and fresh, sweet, unpolluted water and stuff, orders of magnitude higher per capita than just about every other country in the world, with perhaps the exception of Russia.
Right, no question that we'll be able to rebound. All right, so I think we're at the end of our show. Thank you, Mike, so much for coming on, and I hope that you'll come on again in the future.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the wonderful guests you've brought on. This has been, gosh, I hate to say it, but it's been fun.
Yeah, it has. Will you come back? Will you come back?
Yes, of course I will.
Awesome.
Hey, Patrick, my email address is mtgoodrich.
Wait. Oh, do you want that on? Because everybody's going to hear it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
mtgoodrich@aol.com. I need to pass on something to you. You can either reach me, or I can get a hold of you, or you can just send me your email address, and I'll get back to you on that. If we can do that, I'll be a happy camper.
Trav, thank
Certainly,
you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Trav, thank you for coming. I really appreciate all of your help. And Patrick, thank you for coming on the show. And I know it was kind of like a last-minute thing, but I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts. And so this was a great panel. Thank all of you. I hope to have all of you back on again. And everybody stay safe. And if you're in the Chicago area, stay warm. We're freezing over here. And I had a great time, and maybe we could do this again soon.
Okay. Thanks a lot, honey.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, you guys.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you.